The night I became a scandal, I was wearing a $3,000 dress and holding a glass of wine worth more than most people's rent. The night I kissed a stranger to destroy my fiancé's reputation and accidentally fell for a man who would ruin me in ways I never imagined. This is the story of how betrayal at a luxury gala led me into the arms of a dangerous man, how love became my greatest weapon and my deepest wound, and how I built an empire from the wreckage of my shattered life. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Palazzo Fontaine didn't do subtle. Everything about the venue screamed wealth in the most aggressive way possible. Marble floors that could probably fund a small country's healthcare system, chandeliers dripping with crystals that caught the light like frozen champagne, and a guest list that read like a Forbes billionaire ranking mixed with a Hollywood awards show. Lena Cross stood near the exhibition table, her fingers resting lightly on the stem of her glass, trying to look like she belonged there, which technically she did. She'd been invited as the sommelier consultant for the event, handpicked to curate the wine pairings for one of the year's most exclusive charity galas. It should have been her crowning moment, proof that she'd finally made it in a world that had tried damn hard to keep her out. But standing there in her midnight blue gown, hair swept up in a style that had taken her roommate 40 minutes and 3 YouTube tutorials to perfect, Lena felt like an imposter wearing someone else's life. "You look nervous," said Marcus Chen, the event coordinator, appearing at her elbow with his tablet and his perpetually stressed expression. "Please tell me you're not nervous. If you're nervous, I'm nervous, and I've already had 4 espressos." "I'm fine," Lena lied, adjusting the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Adrian last Christmas. "Just making sure everything's ready." "Everything's perfect. The 1982 Chateau Margaux is positioned exactly where you wanted it. The Burgundy selection is chilling at precisely 55 degrees. The Barolo is breathing. You've checked everything 17 times. Marcus tilted his head, studying her with the shrewd assessment of someone who made their living reading people. "This isn't about the wine." He was right, but Lena wasn't about to admit it. Adrian was late, again. Her her soon-to-be fiancé, since they hadn't officially announced the engagement yet, was supposed to have arrived 30 minutes ago. He'd promised to be here, promised to stand beside her during what was essentially her professional debut, in front of people who could make or break her career. Adrian Cole, with his old money surname and his family's struggling vineyard empire, who'd swept into her life 2 years ago at a wine tasting in Napa and made her believe she could have both love and success. Who'd proposed 3 months ago with his grandmother's ring and plans for a spring wedding at their estate, who is currently nowhere to be found. "He's probably just stuck in traffic," Lena said, more to herself than Marcus. "Right. Traffic. In a city where his family basically owns half the real estate." Marcus's phone buzzed. "Okay, guests are arriving. Smile, look brilliant, and try not to murder anyone with a corkscrew. I've got enough problems." He vanished into the crowd, leaving Lena alone with her carefully curated wine collection and her growing sense of unease. The gala was already in full swing. Women in gowns that cost more than Lena's annual rent glided past, their jewelry catching the light like small galaxies. Men in tuxedos that actually fit properly, not rental fits but tailored to your exact measurements fits, networked with the casual confidence of people who'd never worried about a single bill in their lives. Lena recognized faces from magazine covers, a tech billionaire who'd just bought a media empire, an actress who'd won an Oscar last year, a hotel heiress whose DUI mugshot had somehow launched a perfume line. This was Adrian's world, the one he'd been born into, the one she'd been trying to navigate for 2 years like a foreigner learning a new language. "Miss Cross?" She turned to find a silver-haired man in an immaculate tuxedo studying the wine display with the intensity of someone appraising artwork. Gerald Hartwick, she recognized immediately, a collector whose wine cellar was legendary, whose approval could launch a sommelier's career into the stratosphere. "Mr. Hartwick." She extended her hand, forcing warmth into her voice despite the anxiety crawling up her spine. "I'm honored you came. I was intrigued by your selection." He gestured to the bottles arranged like precious artifacts under soft lighting. "Bold choices. The 1982 Margaux, of course, is expected at an event like this. But the 2010 Barolo? The 1996 Krug? You're either very confident or very foolish. Hopefully the former. Lena said, meeting his gaze steadily. I believe wine should tell a story, not just impress with price tags. Tonight's pairings are about journey, from the bold beginning of the Barolo to the refined complexity of the Margot. Each bottle represents a chapter. Hartwick's eyebrow lifted slightly. Poetic. Let's see if your palate matches your presentation. He accepted a glass from the server, swirling it with practiced precision. Where did you train? Your credentials weren't in the program. Because she didn't have the kind of credentials that impressed people like Hartwick. No prestigious wine academy in France. No apprenticeship under a famous sommelier. Just night classes while working 3 jobs, certifications earned through sheer stubborn determination, and a palate she'd developed by tasting everything she could afford and memorizing everything she couldn't. I trained in Sonoma, she said carefully, worked my way through various positions, retail, distribution, private consultation. I believe the best education comes from experience, not pedigree. It was a diplomatic answer that sidestepped the truth. She'd clawed her way into this world from the outside, fighting for every opportunity while people like Adrian simply inherited their place at the table. Interesting philosophy. Hartwick took a sip, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment that felt like an eternity, he nodded. Excellent. Your 96 Krug is superb. I'd like to discuss your availability for my spring auction. We can— Lena! The voice cut through the ambient noise of the gala like a knife. Lena's sister, Claire, materialized from the crowd in a red dress that was just slightly too tight, too low cut, too much for an event like this. Her blonde hair, the same shade Lena paid a fortune to maintain, but which Claire somehow achieved naturally, was loose around her shoulders, and her makeup was smudged in a way that suggested she'd been doing more than just networking. Claire, Lena kept her voice level, aware of Hartwick watching this interaction with the detached interest of someone observing a social experiment. I didn't know you were coming. Adrian got me a ticket last minute. Isn't he sweet? Claire's smile was bright and sharp, like a knife wrapped in silk. He said you wouldn't mind. Of course he did. Adrian was always doing things like that, making decisions about Lena's professional events without consulting her, assuming she'd just roll with whatever he decided because that's what accommodating girlfriends did. How thoughtful, Lena said, her jaw tight. Mr. Hartwick, this is my sister Claire. Claire, this is Gerald Hartwick, one of the premier collectors in the country. Lovely to meet you. Claire barely glanced at him before turning back to Lena, her eyes glittering with something Lena couldn't quite read. Have you seen Adrian? I need to ask him something. He's not here yet. Really? That's weird. Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or excitement. Anyway, I'll find him later. Love the wine display, sis. Very you. She disappeared back into the crowd before Lena could decide if that was a compliment or an insult. Family, Hartwick observed dryly, is always complicated. You have no idea. They discussed the spring auction for another 10 minutes, details about collection size, vintage preferences, consulting fees that made Lena's heart race, before Hartwick was pulled away by another guest. Lena remained by the wine display, her professional smile fixed in place while her mind churned. Where the hell was Adrian? She pulled out her phone, careful to angle it so the other guests couldn't see her checking it like some anxious teenager. 3 messages, all sent within the last hour. Traffic is hell. Be there soon. You'll be amazing. Love you. Stuck on the 405. This is ridiculous. 20 minutes away. Start without me. The last one had been sent 40 minutes ago. Lena typed out a response. Where are you? Then deleted it. She wasn't going to be that woman, the one who nagged and worried and made her partner feel suffocated. Adrian was busy. He had responsibilities. His family's vineyard business was in trouble, and he was juggling meetings with creditors and investors while trying to salvage his father's legacy. She could handle one evening on her own. Champagne? A server appeared with a tray of crystal flutes, the bubbles catching the light like tiny fireworks. Thank you. Lena accepted a glass, more for something to do with her hands than because she wanted to drink. She'd already had 2 glasses, and she needed to stay sharp for the evening's presentations. The gala moved around her in waves of sound and light. Conversation ebbed and flowed, laughter erupted from clusters of guests. The string quartet in the corner transitioned from Mozart to something more contemporary. Waiters circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than most people's dinners. And then she saw him. Adrian Cole, finally, stepping through the entrance with his characteristic confidence, his tuxedo fitting him like it had been designed specifically for his frame, which it probably had been. His dark hair was styled perfectly, his smile engaging as he greeted people he knew, which was basically everyone in the room. Relief flooded through Lena, followed immediately by annoyance. He'd made it. Late, but here. She could stop worrying and actually enjoy the evening. She started to move toward him, already rehearsing her greeting in her head. Something light, teasing, that would acknowledge his lateness without making a scene, when she noticed his hand. He was holding someone's hand. Not just someone. Claire, her sister. Lena stopped mid-step, confusion freezing her in place. That was weird. Why would Adrian be holding Claire's hand? Maybe he'd run into her outside and they'd walked in together. That made sense. They were family, sort of. Almost family. Soon to be family. But then Adrian turned, pulling Claire closer, and even from across the crowded room, Lena could see the way he looked at her sister, could see the way Claire looked back. And suddenly, with the horrible clarity of someone watching a car crash in slow motion, Lena understood. The late arrivals. The smudged makeup. Claire's weird energy earlier. Adrian's vague excuses about meetings and traffic. They were sleeping together. Her fiancé and her sister were sleeping together. The champagne glass slipped from Lena's fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud. Heads turned, conversations paused. Marcus appeared out of nowhere with a napkin, already directing a staff member to clean up the mess. "You okay?" he whispered. Lena couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away from Adrian and Claire, who'd finally noticed the commotion and were staring at her with matching expressions of shock. Not guilt, not shame, just shock that they'd been caught. "Lena." Adrian started forward, dropping Claire's hand like it had suddenly caught fire. "Don't." The word came out harder than Lena intended, sharp enough to make several nearby guests glance over with interest. This was exactly what she couldn't afford. A scene at her professional debut, personal drama playing out in front of people who could destroy her career with a single whispered rumor. But Adrian kept coming, his face shifting into what she now recognized as his placating expression. The same one he used when explaining why he'd canceled their dinner plans again. Why he'd forgotten her birthday. Why he needed to borrow money to cover the vineyard's expenses. "It's not what you think," he said, which was possibly the most cliché thing he could have said. "Really?" Lena's voice cracked. She was aware of people watching, of phone cameras potentially recording this moment, of her entire world crumbling in real time. "Because it looks like you've been screwing my sister, but please, tell me what I'm supposed to think." Claire had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. She hung back near the entrance, her red dress suddenly seeming obscene, her beauty, which Lena had always envied, now feeling like a weapon that had been turned against her. "Can we talk about this somewhere private?" Adrian glanced around at their audience, his jaw tight with annoyance. Not remorse. Annoyance that Lena was making this difficult. "Why? So you can explain how this is somehow my fault? How I've been too focused on my career, too busy to notice you needed more attention?" Lena's laugh came out brittle. "You know what? Save it. I'm not doing this here." She turned to walk away, to salvage whatever dignity she had left, to get out of this venue before the tears burning behind her eyes actually fell, and ran straight into someone's chest. Hard, solid, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and something darker, more dangerous. Hands caught her arms, steadying her, and Lena looked up into the face of a complete stranger. Except he wasn't completely strange. She'd seen him earlier, lurking at the edges of the gala, watching the crowd with the detached amusement of someone who found the whole spectacle vaguely entertaining. Tall, dark-haired, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see too much. There was something dangerous about him, something that didn't quite fit with the polished atmosphere of the event. "Careful," he said, his voice low and smooth, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Italian, maybe. "These floors are treacherous in heels." "I'm fine." Lena tried to step back, but his hands remained on her arms, holding her in place, not aggressively, but firmly, like he knew she was about to bolt and wanted to prevent it. "You're not fine." His gaze flicked past her to where Adrian and Claire stood frozen. But you could be if you play this right. Excuse me? Your fiancé. The stranger's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's him, I assume. The one who looks like he just got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and the woman in red, sister, cousin. How do you? Lena's brain struggled to process what was happening. This man, this complete stranger, had somehow assessed the entire situation in seconds. I'm observant. It's a professional necessity. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a murmur that only she could hear. Here's the thing. Right now, you're the victim, the betrayed woman. Everyone's watching you, waiting to see how you'll react, already writing the narrative in their heads. Poor Lena Cross, humiliated at her own event. Thanks for the summary, Lena said bitterly. But you could change the narrative. His eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement or might have been calculation. You could make this your moment instead of his. I don't understand. Yes, you do. He released one of her arms but kept the other, his thumb brushing against her wrist in a way that made her pulse jump. You're smarter than you're pretending to be. So here's my offer. I kiss you right here, right now, in front of everyone. We make it look real, passionate, undeniable. And suddenly this isn't a story about you being betrayed, it's a story about you moving on spectacularly. Lena stared at him. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also right. He tilted his head toward Adrian, who was now trying to navigate through the crowd toward them, Claire trailing behind him looking increasingly distressed. In about 30 seconds, he's going to reach you, and he's going to try to explain, make excuses, probably blame you for pushing him away, and everyone here will watch you either accept his apology or fall apart. Either way, you lose. And your solution is to kiss a complete stranger? My solution is to take control of your own story. His hand tightened slightly on her arm. Your choice, Miss Cross. But decide quickly. Later, Lena would wonder what possessed her in that moment. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was the fury burning through her veins. Maybe it was the look on Adrian's face. Not guilt, not love, but irritation that she was making things messy. Or maybe it was just that this stranger was right. She was tired of being the victim. Tired of being the one who accommodated and compromised and bent herself into shapes to fit other people's expectations. Okay, she heard herself say. Do it. The stranger's smile was sharp and knowing. Hold on. He pulled her against him with a confidence that suggested he did this sort of thing regularly, one hand sliding to the small of her back while the other cupped her face with surprising gentleness. Their eyes met for just a second. His were dark, unreadable, dangerous, and then his mouth was on hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was possession and passion and provocation all wrapped together, the kind of kiss that made it very clear this wasn't some friendly peck between acquaintances. His hand tightened in her hair, tilting her head back, and Lena found herself responding without thinking, her fingers clutching at his jacket because otherwise she might have fallen. The gala around them went silent. Or maybe it didn't. And Lena just couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears, the way her heart was slamming against her ribs, the unexpected heat flooding through her body. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were glittering with something wild and reckless. There, he murmured, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Now they have something to talk about. Lena, what the hell? Adrian's voice cut through the moment, furious and shocked. Lena turned to face her fiancé, ex-fiancé, she corrected herself, with a calmness she didn't feel. The stranger's arm remained around her waist, a solid presence that kept her grounded even as everything spun out of control. What? She asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Did you want to say something, Adrian? He looked between her and the stranger, his face flushing with anger. Who the hell is this? Does it matter? Lena pulled the engagement ring off her finger, his grandmother's ring, the one he'd promised meant forever, and held it out. Here, give it to Claire. She seems to like hand-me-downs. Claire made a small, wounded sound. Several guests gasped. Lena felt the stranger's chest shake slightly with what might have been laughter. You're being dramatic, Adrian said, but his voice had lost its confidence. He looked around at the watching crowd, clearly aware that this was playing out very differently than he'd expected. Can we please discuss this somewhere private? Why? So you can gaslight me in private instead of public? Lena dropped the ring into his palm. I'm done, Adrian. Done with you. Done with your excuses. Done with pretending I don't see what's right in front of me. Lena, no, you don't get to Lena me anymore. She felt the stranger's hand press against her back, supportive. Enjoy the gala. I'm sure Claire will be happy to keep you company. She turned, letting the stranger guide her away from Adrian's sputtering protests, from Claire's tears, from the whispers and stares of 200 elite guests who'd just witnessed the most spectacular meltdown of the social season. They didn't stop until they'd reached a small alcove near the back of the venue, partially hidden by an elaborate flower arrangement that probably cost more than Lena's car. Only then did the stranger release her, stepping back with his hands raised in a gesture of peace. You okay? Lena laughed, and it came out slightly hysterical. Am I okay? I just destroyed my engagement, my professional reputation, and probably my entire career in about 90 seconds. Because some stranger suggested I kiss him to prove a point. You didn't destroy anything. You took control of a situation that was already destroyed. He leaned against the wall, studying her with that unsettling intensity. Your fiancé was screwing your sister. That was already happening. All you did was refuse to be humiliated by it. By creating a different kind of scandal entirely. Better to be scandalous than pathetic. Lena stared at him. He was right, which somehow made it worse. Who are you? Victor DeLuca. He extended his hand formally, as if they hadn't just had their tongues in each other's mouths in front of 200 witnesses. And before you ask, yes, I crashed this party. The security here is embarrassingly easy to bypass. You crashed? Lena pressed her fingers to her temples. Why? Because I was bored, and charity galas are excellent places to observe people with more money than sense. His smile was sharp. Also, I heard the wine selection was supposed to be exceptional. I wanted to see if the sommelier lived up to the hype. And does she? The wine is excellent. The sommelier is even better. Victor's gaze traveled over her, assessing. You have good instincts, Lena Cross, both with wine and with knowing when to burn bridges. That's supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be true. He pulled a business card from his pocket. Heavy stock, elegant printing, just a name and a phone number. When you're done panicking and ready to talk about what comes next, call me. What comes next? Lena took the card automatically. What are you talking about? Revenge? Rebuilding. Taking everything that bastard thought he had and making it yours instead. Victor straightened, adjusting his cufflinks. I deal in acquisitions, Miss Cross. Art, real estate, businesses that are undervalued. Your ex-fiancé's family vineyard, for example. I understand it's in financial trouble. Lena's breath caught. How do you know that? I know lots of things. It's what I do. He started to walk away, then paused. That kiss, by the way, that wasn't entirely for show, just so you know. And then he was gone, disappearing back into the crowd like he'd never been there at all, leaving Lena standing alone with a business card and the wreckage of her old life scattered around her feet. Her phone buzzed. Messages were already flooding in, from friends, from colleagues, from people she barely knew who'd somehow already heard about what happened. The gossip network in this world moved at light speed. Marcus appeared, looking simultaneously stressed and impressed. Okay, so that was something. Are you all right? Do you need me to call security? Should I be worried about lawsuits? I'm fine. Lena tucked Victor's card into her clutch. Is Hartwick still here? Hartwick? Marcus blinked. I mean, yes, but Lena, maybe you should go home. This has been a lot. I'm not going home. She smoothed down her dress, lifted her chin. I'm going to finish this event. I'm going to do the wine presentation I prepared. And I'm going to show everyone here that I'm a professional who doesn't fall apart just because her personal life imploded. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're either incredibly brave or completely insane. Can't I be both? He laughed despite himself. Okay, wine presentation in 20 minutes. Try not to kiss any more strangers before then? No promises. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and pointed questions disguised as concern. Lena presented the wine pairings with a steady voice and a performance that would have made any actress proud. She discussed vintage variations with Hartwick, negotiated consulting fees with a hotel chain owner, and deflected questions about that man and the incident with practiced ease. Adrian and Claire left early, Claire crying, Adrian looking furious. Lena didn't watch them go. By the time the gala ended, she'd secured 3 new consulting contracts, Hartwick's spring auction project, and a reputation as either the most professional woman in the industry or the most scandalous, depending on who you asked. She'd also made a decision. In the Uber home, she'd splurged on an XL because her feet were killing her and she needed space to breathe. Lena pulled out Victor DeLuca's business card. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. The printing was embossed. No title, no company name. Just a name and a number, which somehow made it more ominous than reassuring. Ideal in acquisitions. Adrian's family vineyard was failing. Everyone in the industry knew it, though people were too polite to say it directly. The Cole estate had been struggling for years, mismanaged by Adrian's father and then nearly destroyed by Adrian's attempts to modernize without understanding the fundamentals. They were bleeding money, hemorrhaging reputation, and probably 6 months away from bankruptcy, and Victor DeLuca wanted to acquire it. Which meant what, exactly? That he was a businessman who saw an opportunity, or something else? Lena should have been exhausted, should have been crying, falling apart, mourning the end of her engagement and the betrayal of her sister, should have been questioning every choice that had led to this moment. Instead, she felt clear, focused, angry in a productive way that made her want to build something rather than break down. She typed out a text to the number on the card. "I'm interested. Let's talk." The response came within seconds. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'll send you an address. Come alone." Ominous. "I prefer intriguing. See you tomorrow, Lena." She stared at the exchange, then at her reflection in the car window. Her makeup was still perfect, thanks to the expensive setting spray her roommate had insisted on. Her hair had come slightly loose from its updo, softening her face. She looked like someone who'd just survived a battle, or someone about to start a war. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. "Your sister is crying. What did you do?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I heard what happened." Just blame, automatic and immediate, because of course this was somehow Lena's fault. It had always been Lana's fault. The difficult daughter, the one who wanted too much, expected too much, refused to just accept what she was given and be grateful. Lena deleted the message without responding. Then she blocked Claire's number, Adrian's number, and, after a moment's hesitation, her mother's number too. Scorched earth. That's what Victor had offered. The chance to burn everything down and rebuild from the ashes. The question was whether Lena was brave enough to light the match. She looked at her reflection again, at the woman who'd kissed a dangerous stranger and thrown her engagement ring and her cheating fiancé's face in front of the city's elite, at the woman who'd finished her professional presentation with tears still burning behind her eyes and rage still churning in her gut. "Yeah," she said quietly to her reflection. "I think I am." The Uber pulled up to her apartment building, a modest place in a decent neighborhood, nothing like the luxury Adrian had promised once they were married. Lena paid the driver, added a generous tip, and walked inside on aching feet, her mind already racing ahead to tomorrow's meeting. Her roommate, Jess, was waiting up on the couch, laptop open, wine glass in hand. "Oh my God," she said as soon as Lena walked in. "Oh my God, you're all over social media. There are like 17 different videos of you kissing that guy. Who is he? Please tell me you're okay. Please tell me you didn't actually kill Adrian because I really don't want to be an accessory to murder." "I'm fine." Lena kicked off her heels, letting them land wherever they fell. "Get me a glass of that wine. The cheap stuff, not the good bottle. I need to stop tasting everything like it's a professional evaluation." "You kissed a stranger." Jess poured wine with shaking hands. "Like, really kissed him. There are close-ups. His hand was in your hair. It looked like a movie. It felt like a movie. And Adrian and Claire? Sleeping together. Probably have been for months." Lena accepted the wine glass, taking a long drink that would have made her sommelier instructors weep. "I gave him the ring back, in front of everyone. Pretty sure my career is either over or just beginning, and I can't tell which." Jess sat down hard. "Holy shit. Yeah. So what now?" Lena thought about Victor's card still tucked in her clutch, about the meeting tomorrow, about the vineyard that Adrian loved more than he'd ever loved her, the family legacy he'd do anything to save, about taking everything he cared about and making it hers instead. Now? She smiled, and it felt dangerous. Now I make them regret ever underestimating me. The address Victor sent turned out to be a private art gallery in a part of the city Lena rarely visited, the kind of neighborhood where even the coffee shops had waiting lists, and the boutiques didn't display prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The gallery itself was unmarked, just a sleek black door with a brass number plate and a doorbell that looked more expensive than Lena's entire outfit. She dressed carefully that morning, rejecting 3 different looks before settling on tailored black pants and a cream silk blouse. Professional, but not trying too hard. Jess had watched her change clothes with increasing concern, making commentary like a very anxious sports announcer. "Are you sure about this?" Jess had asked for the 4th time while Lena applied lipstick. "I mean, the guy crashed a charity gala and basically attacked you with his face in front of 200 people. That's not exactly screaming trustworthy business partner." "He didn't attack me. I agreed to it. Under duress. Under fury," Lena corrected, checking her reflection one final time. "There's a difference." Now, standing outside the gallery at 1:58 p.m., she was starting to wonder if Jess had a point. What was she doing here? Meeting a man she didn't know, in a location she'd never been, to discuss what? Revenge? Business? Both? She pressed the doorbell. The door opened immediately, revealing a young woman in all black with severe bangs and the kind of bored expression that suggested she'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "Lena Cross? That's me? 2nd floor. He's waiting." The interior of the gallery was exactly what Lena expected. White walls, polished concrete floors, dramatic lighting highlighting pieces of art that probably cost more than most people's houses. A sculpture that looked like twisted metal occupied the center of the 1st floor. Paintings lined the walls, abstract swirls of color that either meant something profound or nothing at all, depending on who was looking. Lena climbed the floating staircase, her heels clicking against the metal steps. The 2nd floor was quieter, more intimate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the street below. More art, though these pieces seemed older, more classical. And at the far end of the space, standing in front of a painting that looked Renaissance era, was Victor De Luca. He'd traded his tuxedo for dark jeans and a black sweater that probably cost what Lena made in a month, but somehow still looked casual on him. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, his smile was sharp and knowing. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you'd spend all night talking yourself out of it." Victor gestured to a seating area near the windows, leather chairs, a low table with coffee already prepared. "But here you are, right on time. That tells me something. That I'm punctual? That you're serious." He poured coffee into 2 cups, added cream to one without asking. Somehow he'd guessed how she took it. "Sit. We have a lot to discuss." Lena sat, accepting the coffee and hating that it was exactly how she liked it. "You said you deal in acquisitions." "I do." "What kind?" "The interesting kind." Victor settled into the chair across from her, stretching his legs out. "Businesses that are failing but salvageable. Art that's undervalued. Real estate that people don't know what to do with. I find things that are worth more than their current owners realize, and I make them reach their potential." "That sounds rehearsed, because I've said it 1,000 times." His smile widened. "But it's true. I'm good at seeing value where others see problems, like your ex-fiance's vineyard, for example." There it was, the real reason she was here. "The coal estate," Lena said carefully. "What do you know about it?" "Everything." Victor pulled a tablet from the bag beside his chair, tapped a few times, then handed it to her. 32 acres in Sonoma Valley. Prime location, excellent terroir, established vines that are over 40 years old. The property includes the main house, a historical estate built in 1887, 3 guest cottages, a tasting room that's been closed for 2 years, and production facilities that are operating at about 30% capacity. Lena scrolled through the information on the screen. Financial reports, production numbers, market analysis. It was comprehensive and damning. The coal vineyard was hemorrhaging money, had been for years. "Adrian's father expanded too quickly," Victor continued. "Took out loans against the property to fund a distribution deal that fell through. Then health problems forced him to step back, and Adrian took over without any real understanding of the business. He knows wine, I'll give him that, but he doesn't know management, doesn't know finance, doesn't know when to cut losses. How do you know all this? I make it my business to know. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. The vineyard is 6 months, maybe 8, from foreclosure. The bank is circling. Creditors are getting aggressive. Adrian's been trying to save it by throwing good money after bad. Refinancing, taking out personal loans, probably maxing out credit cards. It's a sinking ship and he's bailing water with a teaspoon. Lena felt something twist in her chest. She'd known the vineyard was in trouble. Adrian had talked about it constantly, had borrowed money from her twice to cover temporary cash flow issues. But seeing it laid out like this, in cold numbers and brutal analysis, was different. "Why do you want it?" she asked. "Because underneath the mismanagement, it's an exceptional property. The bones are good. The land is good. The reputation, despite recent problems, still carries weight." Victor took the tablet back, set it aside. With the right investment and the right leadership, the coal estate could be worth 10 times what it's currently valued at. "And you think you're the right leadership?" "No." His eyes locked on hers. "I think you are." Lena laughed before she could stop herself. "Me? I'm a sommelier, not a vineyard manager." "You're a sommelier who understands wine at a molecular level. Who knows terroir and vintage and what makes one bottle worth thousands while another sits on a shelf at grocery stores? You know the market, you know the product, and you know what people want." Victor's intensity was unsettling. "What you don't know is business operations, which is why you'd have me. I handle the money, the acquisitions, the infrastructure. You handle everything else, production, branding, positioning in the market. We'd be partners." Partners. Lena tested the word, found it strange in her mouth. In what exactly? Buying Adrian's family vineyard out from under him? In building something exceptional. The fact that it hurts your ex-fiancé is just a bonus. There was a long silence. Outside the windows, the city moved on. Cars passing, people walking, life continuing like Lena's world hadn't just exploded 2 nights ago. She thought about Adrian's face when she'd thrown the ring at him. Claire's tears. Her mother's text, blaming Lena for causing problems instead of asking if she was okay. "Why me?" Lena asked finally. "You could find any number of experienced vineyard managers. People with credentials and track records. Why offer this to someone you just met?" "Because everyone with credentials and track records would do what's expected. They'd make it profitable but boring. They'd play it safe." Victor stood, walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. "You? You kissed a stranger in front of 200 people to prove a point. You didn't fall apart. You didn't run away. You finished your presentation like nothing happened. That takes guts. That takes vision. That's what I need." "You need someone reckless?" "I need someone who understands that sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better." He turned back to face her. "So here's what I'm proposing. I acquire the coal vineyard. I already have the financing lined up, and given their situation, they won't have much choice but to accept. You come on as creative director, head of production, whatever title you want. We rebuild the brand from the ground up, modern, fresh, but respecting the heritage. Within 3 years, we make it the most talked about vineyard in California. And what do I get out of this? Equity. 20% ownership once the acquisition is complete. Salary that's triple what you're making now. Your name on every bottle. Recognition as the person who saved the coal legacy." Victor's smile was sharp. "And the satisfaction of knowing you took everything Adrian thought was his birthright and made it yours instead." It was insane. It was vindictive. It was probably a terrible idea that would blow up in her face. It was also the most appealing offer Lena had ever received. "I need to think about it," she said. "No, you don't." Victor crossed back to her, held out his hand. "You knew your answer before you walked in here. You knew it last night when you texted me. You're just scared of admitting it to yourself." "Maybe I'm scared of making another mistake." Lena didn't take his hand. "I thought I knew Adrian. Thought I understood what we were building together. Clearly my judgment isn't exactly trustworthy right now." "Your judgment about Adrian was clouded by emotion. This is business." Victor's hand remained extended. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust yourself. Trust your knowledge of wine, your understanding of the market, your ability to see potential. Can you do that?" Could she? Lena thought about the last 2 years with Adrian. How many times had she swallowed her opinions to keep the peace? How many ideas had she shelved because Adrian dismissed them as too risky or too expensive? How often had she made herself smaller to fit into his world? She thought about Claire, who'd always gotten everything easily, the better grades, the prettier face, their mother's automatic approval. Who'd taken Lena's fiancé like it was just one more thing she deserved more than her sister. She thought about the vineyard itself, which she'd visited a dozen times, had walked through the rows of vines imagining what she'd do differently if it were hers, the tasting room she'd redesign, the wine club she'd launch, the events she'd host, all the potential Adrian was too incompetent to see. Lena stood, met Victor's eyes, and shook his hand. Okay, let's do it. His grip was firm, his smile genuine. Welcome aboard, partner. They spent the next 2 hours going over details that made Lena's head spin. Victor pulled up contracts, financial projections, timelines. He explained how the acquisition would work, an LLC he'd establish, the offer he'd make to the bank holding the Cole estate's primary mortgage, the buyout terms for Adrian's remaining equity. He'll fight it, Lena said, scanning through a document about asset valuation. Adrian won't just let the vineyard go without a fight. He doesn't have a choice. The bank wants their money, and they'll take the first decent offer they get. Adrian can fight all he wants, but unless he can come up with about $8 million in the next 60 days, he's out. Victor made a notation on his tablet. The real question is whether he'll make this personal. It's already personal. Fair point. Victor looked up from his screen. How much contact have you had with him since the gala? None. I blocked his number, my sister's too. Smart. Keep it that way. When news of the acquisition breaks, and it will break fast, he's going to lose his mind. He'll try to contact you, probably try to convince you that I'm manipulating you or that you're making a mistake. Don't engage. I'm not planning to. I'm serious, Lena. Victor's expression hardened. Men like Adrian, when they lose control, they get desperate. And desperate men do stupid things. You need to be prepared for that. Something in his tone made Lena pause. You sound like you've dealt with this before. I've made a career out of acquiring things from people who don't want to sell. You learn patterns. He saved something on his tablet, then set it aside. Which brings me to the next topic. Where are you living right now? An apartment in Westbrook. Why? You're going to need to relocate. Not immediately, but soon. Once we take over the vineyard, it makes sense for you to be on site. There's a cottage on the property that's been vacant. We can renovate it, make it yours. The cottage. Lena knew which one he meant. The smallest of the guest houses, tucked back near the production facilities. She'd always loved it, had mentioned once to Adrian that it would be perfect as an office or a private tasting space. He dismissed the idea, said it needed too much work. You've really thought this through, she said. I don't make $8 million acquisitions on impulse. Victor stood, stretched. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her to another room on the second floor, smaller and more private. The walls here were covered in photographs, vineyards at different times of day, close-ups of grape clusters, wide shots of rolling hills covered in vines. These are from properties I've acquired over the last decade, Victor explained, pointing to different images. Tuscany, Bordeaux, Napa, Argentina. Some I still own, some I've sold after turning them around, but all of them started the same way. Undervalued, mismanaged, one bad season from bankruptcy. And you saved them all? I made them profitable. That's not the same as saving them. He stopped in front of a photograph of a vineyard at sunset, the light golden and perfect. The people who owned these places before me, most of them resented me for years. Thought I'd stolen their legacy, destroyed their family heritage. But eventually, when they saw what I'd built, some of them came around. Realized that letting go was the best thing that could have happened. You think Adrian will come around? No. Victor's smile was cold. Adrian will hate you forever. But that's his problem, not yours. Lena studied the photographs, trying to imagine the Cole vineyard transformed. New branding, new direction, her vision instead of Adrian's. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. When does this start? She asked. The acquisition? I'm making the offer tomorrow. Should be finalized within 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they drag their feet. Victor turned to face her. Your part starts now. I need you to put together a complete vision for the rebrand. Target market, product line, pricing strategy, marketing approach, everything. I want to know exactly what we're building before we break ground. That's a lot of work. That's the job. He checked his watch. You have 72 hours. Can you do it? It was impossible. A complete rebrand strategy in 3 days? Lena would need weeks, maybe months to do it properly. But looking at Victor's expression, she understood this was a test. He was asking if she was serious, if she could deliver under pressure, if she had what it took to be his partner instead of just another employee he'd hired. Yes, she said. I can do it. Good. Victor walked her back toward the stairs. I'll have my lawyer send over the partnership agreement tonight. Read it carefully. Have your own lawyer review it if you want. Sign it and send it back by Monday. I don't have a lawyer. Then get one. This is a multi-million-dollar business deal, Lena. You need representation. He paused at the top of the stairs. Any other questions? About 1,000, but Lena settled on the most pressing one. That kiss at the gala. You said it wasn't entirely for show. Victor's expression shifted, became something more guarded. No, it wasn't. So what was it? Opportunity, impulse, interest. He stepped closer, and Lena fought the urge to back away. I saw a woman about to be humiliated by a man who didn't deserve her, and I saw a chance to change the narrative. The fact that I wanted to kiss you anyway just made the decision easier. That's very calculated. I'm a calculated person. His hand came up, fingers brushing her jawline in an echo of that moment at the gala. But not everything is business, Lena. Sometimes I just see something I want and take it. Her breath caught. This close, she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could feel the pull of attraction mixed with danger, a combination that should have sent her running, but instead kept her frozen in place. We're going to be business partners, she said, proud that her voice stayed steady. That complicates things. Everything worth having is complicated. Victor's thumb traced along her cheekbone. But you're right. Business first, the rest, we'll see what happens. He stepped back, breaking the moment, and Lena could breathe again. My driver will take you home, Victor said, all business now. You'll need to clear your schedule for the next few months. Quit your consulting jobs or at least put them on hold. This is going to take all your attention. I have contracts. Break them. Pay the penalty fees if you have to. I'll cover it. He started down the stairs. From now on, the vineyard is your priority. Everything else is secondary. Lena followed him down, her mind already racing through everything she'd need to do. Her consulting clients, her apartment lease, her entire life that would need to be restructured around this new reality. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. The woman with severe bangs appeared with Lena's coat. Victor walked her to the door where a sleek black car was already waiting at the curb. 3 days, he reminded her. Complete rebrand strategy. Don't disappoint me. I won't. I know. He opened the car door for her. That's why I chose you. The drive back to her apartment took 20 minutes, plenty of time for Lena to start second-guessing every decision she'd just made. She pulled out her phone, stared at the blocked contacts list, then put it away without unblocking anyone. Jess was waiting when Lena walked in, practically vibrating with curiosity. Well? Well, what? Don't play dumb. The mysterious stranger, the secret meeting. Did he offer you money to keep quiet about the kiss? Is he actually a serial killer? Are you joining a cult? Lena dropped her bag on the counter, kicked off her shoes. We're buying Adrian's vineyard. Jess blinked. I'm sorry, what? Victor, the guy from the gala. He's acquiring the Cole estate, and I'm partnering with him to rebuild it. 20% equity, creative control, my name on the product. It's happening. That's... Jess opened and closed her mouth several times. That's insane. That's actually insane. You met this guy 48 hours ago and now you're going into business with him? Yes. To buy your ex-fiancé's family vineyard? Yes. The ex-fiancé who was sleeping with your sister? Also, yes. Jess sat down hard on the couch. Okay. This is either the best revenge plot ever or a complete disaster waiting to happen. Possibly both. Definitely both. Lena poured herself a glass of water, her hands steadier than she expected. I need to put together a complete rebrand strategy in 3 days, and find a lawyer, and probably quit all my consulting work, and figure out how to not have a complete breakdown while doing all of that. You're serious about this? Dead serious. Even though you barely know this guy, even though this whole thing sounds like a setup for either a romance novel or a true crime podcast? Lena thought about Victor's hands on her face, his absolute confidence, the way he'd looked at her like she was capable of everything she'd ever wanted. Thought about the vineyard, the potential, the chance to prove everyone who'd underestimated her completely wrong. Especially because of that, she said. Jess studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, then let's do this. You work on the strategy, I'll research lawyers, we'll order Thai food and pull an all-nighter, like we're back in college. You don't have to... Please, I'm not missing this. Jess opened her laptop. Besides, someone needs to document the moment Lena Cross went from jilted sommelier to vineyard mogul. That's content gold. They worked through the night, Lena sketching out ideas while Jess pulled up market research and competitive analysis. The rebrand strategy started taking shape around 2 a.m., modern but respectful of tradition, targeting younger wine enthusiasts who wanted quality without pretension, positioning the Cole estate as a place where excellence met accessibility. By dawn, Lena had 15 pages of notes, 3 mood boards, and a preliminary product line that made her heart race with possibility. She also had a lawyer, a woman Jess's cousin recommended, who specialized in business partnerships and didn't charge consultation fees until after the first meeting. The partnership agreement arrived in her email at 6 a.m., a PDF, with about 40 pages of legal language that might as well have been written in another language. Lena forwarded it to the lawyer, then fell asleep on the couch, with her laptop still open. She woke up 4 hours later to her phone ringing. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Lena. Adrian's voice hit her like cold water. We need to talk. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're making a huge mistake. Lena sat up, her heart pounding. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, DeLuca. The offer on the vineyard. I know you're involved. Adrian's voice was tight with anger. How could you do this? After everything we built together? We didn't build anything together, Adrian. You built debt and failure while I watched and pretended not to notice. That vineyard is my family's legacy. That vineyard is a business that's failing because you don't know what you're doing, and now it's going to be mine. Lena stood, pacing. You don't get to sleep with my sister and then lecture me about loyalty. Claire was a mistake. I was going to end it. I don't care. And she realized, saying it, that it was true. She didn't care about Adrian's excuses or his regrets or his family legacy. Goodbye, Adrian. She hung up before he could respond, then immediately called Victor. He answered on the second ring. Miss me already? Adrian knows about the acquisition, about my involvement. He just called me. How did he get your number? I don't know. Does it matter? It matters if he's going to become a problem. She heard sounds in the background like Victor was moving through a busy space. What did he say? That I'm making a mistake. That the vineyard is his family legacy. The usual guilt trip. And what did you say? That it's going to be mine now. Victor laughed, genuine and surprised. I knew I chose the right partner. Don't worry about Adrian. He's noise. Focus on your strategy. I want to see it tomorrow. Tomorrow? You said 3 days. I changed my mind. If we're moving fast, we move fast. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., same location. Bring everything you have. He hung up before she could protest. Lena stared at her phone, at the blocked contact list she'd just violated by answering an unknown number. Then she unblocked Adrian's number long enough to send one text. Don't call me again. Any further contact goes through lawyers. She blocked him again immediately, then turned back to her laptop and the mountain of work waiting for her. 24 hours to finalize a complete rebrand strategy. No pressure. Jess emerged from her bedroom, hair standing up, mascara smudged. Was that Adrian? Yes. And? And nothing. He's irrelevant now. Lena pulled up her notes, started refining her product line. I need to have everything ready by tomorrow morning. Can you help me run numbers on pricing tiers? It's Sunday. I know. Normal people rest on Sundays. Good thing we're not normal. Lena looked up, met her roommate's eyes. I'm really doing this, Jess. I'm actually doing this. I know. Jess grabbed her own laptop, settled next to Lena on the couch. And it's going to be amazing or a complete disaster. Either way, I'm here for it. They worked through the day, breaking only for coffee and the Thai food leftovers from the night before. By midnight, Lena had a presentation that she was either incredibly proud of or completely delusional about. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. She showed up at the gallery the next morning with her laptop, her notes, and a confidence that was 60% real and 40% faked. Victor was waiting in the same second-floor space, except this time he wasn't alone. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper suit sat in one of the leather chairs. A younger man, maybe 30, stood by the windows with a tablet. And Victor himself was at the head of a table that definitely hadn't been there during Lena's last visit. You're early, Victor said, checking his watch. Good. This is Margaret Chen, my business attorney, and David Reeves, my financial analyst. They're here to evaluate your strategy. You didn't mention I'd be presenting to an audience. I didn't want you to over-prepare. Victor gestured to the chair at the opposite end of the table. Show us what you've got. Lena had never been more grateful for the presentation skills she'd developed during her consulting work. She plugged in her laptop, pulled up her slides, and launched into the pitch like her entire future depended on it. Because it did. She talked for 45 minutes straight, walking them through market positioning, target demographics, pricing strategies that would make the coal estate accessible without cheapening the brand. She showed them mock-ups for new labels, clean, modern designs that honored the vineyard's history without being trapped by it. She outlined a launch strategy that included a members-only wine club, curated tasting events, and partnerships with restaurants that catered to the exact audience they wanted to reach. Margaret Chen took notes on a legal pad, her expression unreadable. David Reeves asked pointed questions about profit margins and production costs that Lena answered without hesitation, grateful for the all-nighters she'd pulled researching every detail. Victor sat back in his chair, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, but he didn't interrupt once. When she finished, there was silence. Lena stood there, laptop still open, waiting for someone to tell her it was brilliant or terrible or somewhere in between. The membership model, David said finally. You're projecting 1,500 members in year one. That's aggressive, given the current market saturation. It's achievable if we position correctly. We're not competing with Napa's legacy brands. We're offering something different, quality wine with a story that isn't about some dead patriarch's vision from 1952. Young professionals, people in their 30s and 40s, they want authenticity. They want to feel like they're part of something, not just buying a bottle. Lena pulled up a slide showing demographic research. The wine club isn't just about sales, it's about building community. That's what drives long-term loyalty. Margaret looked up from her notes. And the rebranding timeline? You're proposing a complete overhaul in 6 months. That includes new labels, website redesign, product line restructuring, and a launch event. Most rebrand projects this comprehensive take 12 to 18 months minimum. Most rebrand projects aren't being driven by someone with something to prove. Lena met the attorney's gaze steadily. I can move faster because I already know this vineyard inside and out. I've spent 2 years watching it fail, making mental notes about what I'd do differently. This isn't theoretical for me. It's personal. Personal can be dangerous in business, Margaret observed. Personal is what makes it worth doing. Lena clicked to her final slide, a rendering of what the tasting room could look like after renovation. Glass walls, natural light, views of the vines stretching toward the hills. People don't buy wine because they need it. They buy it because it makes them feel something. Every decision I've made here is designed to create that emotional connection. That's not dangerous. That's smart business. Victor stood, walked to the windows, his back to the room. Lena couldn't read his body language, couldn't tell if the silence meant he loved it or hated it or was already regretting bringing her into this. The label design, he said without turning around. Who did the mock-ups? I did. Well, I sketched them and then used design software to clean them up. I know they're rough, but the concept is they're not rough. They're exactly right. Victor turned and his smile was genuine. You did this in 24 hours? Technically 36 if you count the first meeting. She's being modest, Margaret interjected, checking something on her tablet. I looked into her background after you sent me the partnership agreement. She's been published in 3 industry journals, consulted for restaurants that have won awards for their wine programs, and has a 92% success rate with her pairing recommendations being adopted by clients. This presentation isn't luck. It's expertise. Lena felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't expected Victor to have her investigated, though she probably should have. The question, David said, setting down his tablet, is whether expertise translates to execution. Can you actually deliver what you're proposing? Because on paper, this looks fantastic. In reality, running a vineyard is 16-hour days, constant problems, and dealing with factors you can't control like weather and crop disease and distribution nightmares. I know that. Do you? Because your resume shows consulting and sommelier work. You've never actually managed production, never handled payroll for a staff of 20, never negotiated with distributors or managed inventory, or dealt with the 1,000 small disasters that happen in agriculture. David wasn't being cruel, just blunt. Victor's putting $8 million into this acquisition. I need to know that investment is protected. The investment is protected because I'm not doing this alone. Lena looked at Victor. That's the whole point of partnership, isn't it? I bring the wine expertise and vision. He brings the business infrastructure and experience. Together we cover each other's blind spots. Exactly. Victor moved back to the table, placed his hands on the back of his chair. Any other concerns? Margaret flipped through her notes. The staffing plan needs work. You're proposing to keep most of the current employees, but some of them have been with the Cole family for decades. There's going to be resistance to new leadership, especially leadership from someone they'll see as the ex-fiancé who stole the vineyard. Let them resist. They'll either adapt or leave. Lena closed her laptop. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to save a business that's failing. If people want to cling to the old way of doing things, the way that drove the vineyard into the ground, they're welcome to find jobs somewhere else. That's cold, David said, though he sounded almost approving. That's realistic. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. Victor laughed, sharp and surprised. I think we're done here. Margaret, David, thank you. Send me your final assessment by end of day. He waited until they'd gathered their things and left before turning back to Lena. That was impressive. But? No but. It was genuinely impressive. He picked up her laptop, scrolled through the presentation slides. You're right about the timeline being aggressive, but I like aggressive, and you're definitely right about the emotional connection angle. Wine is theater. It's storytelling. Most vineyard owners forget that. Adrian forgot it. His father never knew it in the first place. Lena sank into one of the chairs, exhaustion hitting her now that the adrenaline was fading. So what happens now? Now we finalize the acquisition. The bank accepted my offer this morning. They were thrilled to get anything close to market value given how underwater the property is. Adrian has 72 hours to match the offer or accept the buyout terms for his remaining equity. He won't match it. He can't. I know. Which means by Friday we own a vineyard. Victor set the laptop down, studied her carefully. How do you feel about that? Honestly? Lena wasn't sure. There was triumph, obviously. Satisfaction at taking something Adrian loved and making it hers. But underneath that was something more complicated. Grief, maybe, for the future she'd imagined with him. Anger at her sister. Fear that she was making a massive mistake trusting a man she barely knew. I feel like I'm jumping off a cliff and hoping you're right about there being water at the bottom instead of rocks, she said. That's fair. Victor pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm having my assistant send you access credentials for the vineyard's financial systems, employee records, production data. Start familiarizing yourself with everything. We take possession Friday at noon. I want to walk the property with you that afternoon. Start making decisions about what stays and what goes. Friday, that's 3 days away. Scared? Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He pocketed his phone. One more thing. There's going to be press coverage. The acquisition of a legacy vineyard by an outsider, especially one connected to the former owner's ex-fiancé, that's gossip gold. You need to be prepared for that. Lena hadn't even thought about press coverage, about her name being in articles, her face potentially in photos, about people picking apart her decisions and her motives and probably her outfit choices too. "What do I say if reporters contact me?" she asked. "Nothing. Direct all media inquiries to Margaret's office. We'll prepare an official statement once the acquisition is finalized. Until then, no comment." Victor walked her toward the stairs. "And Lena, block any numbers you don't recognize. Adrian's going to try to reach you, probably through friends or family. Don't engage. It'll only make things messier. Messier than they already are. You'd be surprised." The rest of Monday and all of Tuesday passed in a blur of paperwork and preparation. Lena met with Margaret to sign the partnership agreement, which her new lawyer had reviewed and declared surprisingly fair, though she'd negotiated 2 small changes regarding intellectual property rights. She gave notice to her consulting clients, most of whom were understanding, a few of whom were pissed about the short timeline. She started packing up her apartment since she'd be moving to the Vineyard Cottage once renovations were done. Wednesday morning, Lena's mother finally got through. She called from a new number, probably borrowed from a friend, and Lena answered without thinking. "Hello? So you're not taking my calls now?" Her mother's voice was tight with hurt and accusation, the same tone she'd used when Lena chose to study viticulture instead of getting a teaching credential like she'd wanted. "Mom, do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Your sister is devastated. Absolutely devastated. She's been crying for days." "Claire is devastated?" Lena laughed, bitter. "That's rich. She slept with my fiancé, but somehow I'm the villain here?" "It wasn't like that. She told me everything. Adrian was unhappy, you were never around, always working. She was just being a friend to him, and things got complicated." "Stop." Lena pressed her fingers to her temple, trying to stave off the headache building behind her eyes. "I'm not doing this. I'm not listening to excuses for why my sister betrayed me and pretending it's somehow my fault. You're taking his family's vineyard, Lena. That's cruel. That's vindictive. That's business. Since when are you this person? This cold, vengeful person who hurts people for revenge?" "Since I got tired of being hurt myself," Lena thought. "Since I realized that being nice and accommodating and understanding just meant people walked all over me. Since I decided I deserved more than the scraps everyone else was willing to give me." "I have to go," she said instead. "Your sister wants to talk to you. She wants to explain—" "I don't care what Claire wants." Lena ended the call, blocked the number, then sat on her couch staring at the phone like it might explode. Jess emerged from the kitchen with coffee. "Your mom? How did you know?" "You have the same expression you get when you're trying not to scream." Jess handed her the mug. "What did she say?" "The usual. That I'm cruel and vindictive and destroying the family. That Claire is the real victim here because she made a mistake and I won't forgive her." Lena took a long drink of coffee, not caring that it burned her tongue. "It's amazing how quickly you got cheated on becomes you're overreacting when family is involved. Your family is toxic. I'm starting to realize that." Thursday night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed scrolling through the Vineyard's financial records Victor had sent, trying to make sense of numbers that painted an even grimmer picture than she'd expected. The coal estate wasn't just failing, it was already failed, held together only by loans and credit and what looked like some creative accounting that probably wasn't entirely legal. Her phone buzzed. Text from Victor. "You awake?" "Unfortunately. Come downstairs." Lena sat up, confused. "I'm at my apartment." "I know. I'm outside." She went to the window, pulled back the curtain, and sure enough, there was Victor's black car parked at the curb. She could see him in the driver's seat, phone glowing in the dark. Against her better judgment, Lena pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, shoved her feet into sneakers, and went downstairs. Victor unlocked the passenger door as she approached. "Get in." "It's almost midnight." "So?" "Normal people sleep at midnight." "Good thing neither of us are normal." He waited until she'd climbed in and buckled up before pulling away from the curb. "I couldn't sleep either. Figured you'd be awake going over the financials." "How did you know?" "Because that's what I'd be doing." Victor drove with casual confidence, like midnight drives through the city were a regular occurrence. "And because you strike me as the kind of person who can't turn her brain off once it starts spinning." He wasn't wrong. Lena leaned back against the leather seat, watching the streets pass by outside. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." They drove for almost an hour, leaving the city behind and heading into wine country. Lena realized where they were going about 10 minutes before they arrived. The Cole estate, dark and silent under the stars. Victor pulled through the main gates, which were open, past the house where Adrian had grown up, and down the winding drive toward the production facilities. He parked near the tasting room and killed the engine. "This is technically trespassing," Lena pointed out. "It's our property in about 12 hours. I'm calling it a preview." Victor got out, and after a moment, Lena followed. The vineyard at night was different than during the day. Quieter, cooler, the rows of vines stretching away into darkness like they went on forever. Lena had been here dozens of times, but always during business hours, always with Adrian or his staff around. Never like this. Alone except for Victor, with nothing but the sound of wind through the leaves and the distant hum of irrigation systems. "I used to come to my family's vineyard at night," Victor said, walking toward the vines. "Back in Italy, before I left. When things got too loud in my head, I'd walk through the rows and just think." "Your family had a vineyard?" "Has. Present tense. My brother runs it now." Victor stopped at the edge of the first row, reached out to touch the leaves. "We don't speak anymore, but last I heard he's doing well. Expanded production, won some awards, all the things my father said I'd never be capable of." There was something in his voice, old pain, carefully controlled. Lena moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "What happened?" she asked. "I wanted to modernize, bring in new techniques, change the product line, target different markets. My father said I was disrespecting tradition. We fought about it for years, and eventually I left. Took my share of the inheritance and started buying other vineyards instead." Victor's smile was cold in the darkness. "Turned out, I was better at fixing other people's family businesses than my own." "Do you regret it? Leaving?" "No, but I regret that it had to be a choice between my vision and my family." He turned to look at her. "That's why I understand what you're doing here. Why I know you'll succeed where others might fail. You've already made that choice. You've already burned those bridges. My mother would say I'm throwing my family away for revenge." "Your mother is wrong. You're choosing yourself over people who are willing to hurt you. That's not revenge. That's survival." They stood there in silence, surrounded by vines that would soon be theirs to reshape. Lena thought about Adrian walking these same rows, about his father before him, about generations of Coles who'd built something and then slowly let it crumble through arrogance and mismanagement. "I'm going to make this place everything it should have been," she said quietly. "Everything Adrian was too scared or too stupid to try. I know you are." Victor's hand found hers in the dark, their fingers intertwining. "That's why we're going to be unstoppable together." It should have felt manipulative, that line. Should have sounded like something a con artist would say to someone he was using. But standing there with Victor's hand warm in hers, looking out at 32 acres of potential, Lena didn't feel used. She felt seen, understood. Like someone had finally looked at her and recognized what she was capable of instead of what she was willing to settle for. "I'm going to kiss you again," Victor said. "But this time it's not for show. This time it's because I want to. So if you don't want that, you need to tell me now." Lena turned to face him fully. "And if I do want it, then stop talking and let me." She kissed him first, actually, rising on her toes to close the distance between them. His mouth was warm despite the cool night air, his hands coming up to frame her face like he'd done at the gala. But this was different, slower, deeper, without the performance aspect or the anger driving it. This was just two people who wanted each other, standing in a vineyard they were about to own, making a choice that would definitely complicate everything. When they finally broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea." "Probably. We're business partners. We should keep things professional." "We should." "I don't do relationships well. I travel constantly. I'm terrible at communication, and I have a documented history of prioritizing work over personal connections." "Good to know." "And you're coming out of a relationship with a cheating bastard. You probably need time to process and heal and all that psychological wellness stuff people talk about." "Definitely. So we should stop this right now before it gets messy." Lena pulled back enough to look at him. "Are we going to stop?" Victor's smile was sharp and honest. "No." "Good." They kissed again, and this time there was no pretense of reluctance. Lena let herself sink into it, into the heat and the want and the reckless feeling of free-falling into something that could either save her or destroy her. Victor's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and she went willingly, her fingers tangling in his hair. "We should establish ground rules," Victor said between kisses. "Keep personal and professional separate." "Absolutely." Lena nipped at his lower lip. "Very professional." "I'm serious. When we're working, we're business partners. No special treatment, no letting this cloud our judgment." "Agreed." She kissed along his jaw. "What about when we're not working?" "When we're not working..." Victor's hand slid under her sweatshirt, warm against her skin. "When we're not working, all rules are off." They made out in the vineyard like teenagers, surrounded by vines that would legally be theirs in a few hours, until the cold finally drove them back to the car. Victor cranked the heat, and Lena settled into the passenger seat, her lips slightly swollen, her heart racing. "I should probably take you home," Victor said, though he made no move to start the car. "Probably." "We have a big day tomorrow. Should get some sleep." "Should." Neither of them moved. "Or," Victor said slowly, "there's a hotel about 20 minutes from here. Nice place. Excellent room service." Lena turned to look at him. "Is this you asking me to spend the night with you?" "This is me suggesting that since we've already established we're terrible at following our own advice about keeping things professional, we might as well fully commit to the bad decisions." "That's incredibly romantic." "I told you I'm bad at relationships." Lena laughed despite herself. "Take me to the hotel." The hotel turned out to be one of those boutique places that catered to wine country tourists, all rustic charm and expensive linens and complimentary bottles of local wines in the rooms. Victor checked them in while Lena tried not to think too hard about what she was doing, about how fast everything was moving, about whether this was healing or just a different kind of self-destruction. The room was on the top floor, with views of the valley that would probably be stunning in daylight. Right now it was just darkness and distant lights. The vineyard they'd just left somewhere out there in the night. "Second thoughts?" Victor asked, setting his keys on the dresser. "About 1,000. Lena sat on the edge of the bed. "But I'm still here." "You don't have to stay. I can take you home. We can pretend this never happened, go back to being just business partners." He leaned against the wall, watching her. "No judgment either way." But that was a lie, wasn't it? There would be judgment. Not from him, maybe, but from her. From the voice in her head that sounded uncomfortably like her mother, telling her she was making another mistake, moving too fast, trusting the wrong person. Lena stood up, crossed the room to where Victor waited. "I'm tired of pretending, tired of being careful and responsible and making all the right choices that still end up with me getting hurt." She placed her hands on his chest, felt his heart beating fast under her palms. "So tonight, I'm making a bad choice. Deliberately. And I'm going to enjoy every second of it." Victor's smile was pure danger. "I can work with that." They didn't make it to the bed immediately. Victor backed her against the wall, his mouth finding hers again while his hands worked at the hem of her sweatshirt. Lena tugged at his shirt, frustrated by buttons until he laughed and helped her, shedding clothes in a trail across the room. When they finally fell onto the bed together, skin against skin, Lena felt something click into place. Not love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But rightness. Like this chaos, this reckless plunge into the unknown, was exactly where she was supposed to be. Later, wrapped in expensive sheets with Victor's arm around her waist, Lena stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what she was feeling. Satisfied, definitely. Nervous about tomorrow, aware that she'd just made everything infinitely more complicated. "You're thinking too loud," Victor murmured against her shoulder. "I can practically hear the gears turning. Just processing. Process out loud. We just slept together hours before taking ownership of a vineyard together. We're going to be working side by side every day. If this thing between us crashes and burns, the business crashes with it." "Yep." "That doesn't worry you?" "It terrifies me." Victor propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "But so does not taking risks. So does playing it safe and regretting what might have been. I've built a career on calculated gambles. This is just another one." "I'm a gamble?" "We're both gambling. On each other. On this vineyard. on the idea that two people who probably shouldn't trust each other can build something extraordinary together. His hand traced patterns on her stomach. Could fail spectacularly. Could also be the best decision either of us ever made. You're not exactly selling me on this being a good idea. I'm being honest. That's what you need right now. Not pretty lies or false promises. Just the truth. This is risky as hell, and we're doing it anyway. Lena turned to face him, their noses almost touching. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fall apart when things get hard? Then I'll hold you together until you remember how strong you actually are. Victor kissed her forehead. And when I inevitably fall apart, because I will, I'm not nearly as stable as I pretend to be. You'll do the same for me. That's the deal. That's the deal? That's the deal. Lena kissed him, soft and slow, sealing whatever agreement they'd just made. Then she settled back against his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and let herself drift towards sleep. Her last thought before unconsciousness took over was that tomorrow she'd own a vineyard. Tomorrow, her entire life would change. Tomorrow there would be consequences and complications, and probably a dozen disasters she hadn't even anticipated yet. But tonight, just for tonight, she could be reckless. Could be someone who took what she wanted instead of waiting for permission. Could be the woman who kissed dangerous strangers and stole her ex-fiancé's legacy and built something beautiful from the wreckage of betrayal. Tomorrow could bring whatever it wanted. She'd face it. They both would. Friday morning arrived with the kind of brightness that felt inappropriate for the magnitude of what was about to happen. Lena woke up tangled in hotel sheets with Victor's arms still around her, sunlight streaming through the windows she'd forgotten to close. For a moment, she just lay there, feeling the warmth of his body against her back, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the weight of reality settling over her like a heavy blanket. Today she became a vineyard owner. Today everything changed. Victor stirred behind her, his hand tightening briefly before he fully woke. What time is it? Almost 8. Lena turned to face him, studying his face in the morning light. He looked younger like this, less dangerous, though she was learning that might be an illusion. We should probably get moving. Probably. He didn't move, just traced his fingers along her shoulder. Having regrets yet? Ask me again in 12 hours. They showered separately, an attempt at maintaining some boundaries that felt ridiculous given what they'd done the night before, and grabbed coffee from the hotel lobby before heading to the vineyard. Victor drove in silence, his expression shifting into something more focused, more businesslike. Lena watched the landscape pass by and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. The formal transfer of ownership happened in a conference room at the bank, surrounded by lawyers and paperwork that seemed endless. Adrian wasn't there. He'd signed his buyout agreement remotely, through his attorney, which Lena suspected Victor had arranged deliberately, sparing them both a confrontation that would have been ugly and unproductive. Margaret walked them through every document, explaining terms and conditions in language that was supposed to be English but sounded more like a foreign dialect. Lena signed her name so many times her hand cramped. Victor remained calm throughout, asking pointed questions about liability clauses and insurance requirements, looking every bit the experienced businessman who'd done this dozens of times before. When the bank manager finally handed over the keys, actual physical keys, which seemed almost quaint, Victor passed them immediately to Lena. "Your vineyard," he said simply. She stared at the keys in her palm, cool metal that represented 32 acres of land, a house, production facilities, and a future she was either going to build or destroy. "Our vineyard. Yours to run." "I'm just the money." Victor stood, shook hands with the lawyers and bank manager. "Shall we go see our investment?" The drive from the bank to the property took 15 minutes. Lena spent the entire time gripping the keys hard enough to leave impressions in her palm, her stomach a knot of anticipation and terror. When they pulled through the gates, their gates now, she saw several cars already parked near the main house. "The staff?" she asked. "I asked Margaret to arrange a meeting for noon. Figured you'd want to address everyone, let them know what's happening." Victor parked next to a dusty pickup truck that probably belonged to Miguel, the vineyard manager who'd been with the Cole family for 20 years. "You ready?" "No." "Good answer." He squeezed her hand briefly. "Remember, you're in charge now. You don't need to apologize or explain or make anyone like you. Just tell them how things are going to be." They walked toward the house together, though Victor dropped back a few steps as they approached, letting Lena lead. The front door was unlocked. Inside, 15 people were gathered in the main room: field workers, production staff, the tasting room manager who hadn't had a tasting room to manage in 2 years. All of them turned to stare as Lena entered, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Miguel stood near the fireplace, his weathered face unreadable. He'd always been kind to Lena during her visits with Adrian, had explained things about the vines and the harvest process with patient detail. Now he looked at her like she was a stranger. "Thank you all for coming," Lena said, pleased that her voice came out steady. "I'm sure you've all heard that the vineyard has been acquired by a new ownership group. That group is me and Mr. DeLuca." She gestured to Victor, who'd positioned himself near the doorway. "I know this is unexpected. I know some of you probably have feelings about the transition, especially given my previous relationship with Adrian Cole. But here's what matters. This vineyard was failing. You all know that. Some of you have been working here for years, watching it decline, probably worrying about your jobs. That ends now. Why should we believe you?" The question came from Tom, one of the older field workers. His arms were crossed, his jaw set. "You're just Adrian's ex-girlfriend playing revenge games." "You're right, I am Adrian's ex-girlfriend. And yes, there's satisfaction in this for me. I won't pretend otherwise." Lena met his gaze directly. "But if this was just about revenge, I'd buy the place and burn it down. Instead, I'm investing money and time and my entire professional reputation into making this vineyard succeed. Because underneath Adrian's mismanagement, this place is exceptional. The terroir is perfect, the vines are established, the location is ideal. Everything needed to be great is already here. It just needed leadership that wasn't incompetent." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded slightly. "So here's the deal," Lena continued. "We're doing a complete rebrand. New labels, new product line, new market positioning. That means changes to how we do production, to our distribution strategy, to everything. Some of you will adapt well to those changes. Some of you won't. If you can't work under new ownership, if you can't take direction from me, you're free to leave. I'll provide 2 weeks severance and a reference letter. No hard feelings." "And if we stay?" Miguel asked quietly. "If you stay, you commit to making this vineyard the best in the valley. You trust my vision even when you don't understand it. You work harder than you've probably had to work in years because we're starting from behind and we need to catch up fast." Lena paused. "In exchange, I'll pay you fairly, treat you with respect, and build something you'll be proud to tell people you helped create. I know wine. Some of you have been doing this longer than I've been alive, and I'm going to rely on that experience. But I also know what I'm doing, and I need you to trust that." There was silence. People exchanged glances, having silent conversations with their eyes. Finally, Miguel stepped forward. "I've worked for the Cole family since I was 20 years old. This place is part of me." But Mr. Adrian, he didn't listen. Had ideas that didn't make sense, spent money on the wrong things, wouldn't hear when we told him something wouldn't work. He looked at Lena carefully. "You saying you'll be different?" "I'm saying I'll listen. Doesn't mean I'll always agree, but I'll listen." Lena held out her hand. "Stay. Help me fix this place." Miguel studied her for a long moment, then shook her hand. His grip was firm, calloused from decades of work. "Okay, I stay. But you screw this up like he did. I'm gone." "Fair enough." One by one, the others agreed. A few left, Tom and 2 others who said they couldn't work for Adrian's ex, which Lena respected, even if it stung. But the core team remained, and by the time the meeting ended, Lena felt like she'd just survived the first real test. Victor had disappeared at some point during the meeting. She found him outside, walking through the rows of vines with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian to someone. He waved when he saw her, wrapped up the call, and met her halfway. "How'd it go?" "Lost 3 people, kept the rest." Lena squinted up at the sun, feeling the heat of the afternoon. Miguel's on board, which is huge. He knows these vines better than anyone. "Good." Victor checked his watch. "I have a call with the architect in an hour about the cottage renovations. Want to walk through it first? Make sure the plans match what you want?" The cottage was exactly how Lena remembered it. Small, but charming, with good bones hidden under peeling paint and outdated fixtures. Victor pulled up blueprints on his tablet, showing her proposed changes that would transform it from shabby storage space into an actual livable home. Kitchen here, open concept into the living area, bedroom and bathroom at the back. We can add a small office space if you want, or keep it as a second bedroom for guests. He zoomed in on details. Hardwood floors throughout, new windows, updated electrical and plumbing. Should be done in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? That's fast. I pay contractors well to move quickly. Victor walked through the empty space, gesturing. You'll be living on site, which means you need a space that doesn't feel like work, somewhere you can actually relax. Lena tried to imagine herself here, waking up with views of the vineyard, walking to work through the rows of vines. It felt surreal and right at the same time. They spent the afternoon making decisions about the cottage, about which equipment needed replacing in the production facility, about timeline for the tasting room renovation. It was exhausting and exhilarating, every choice feeling weighted with significance. By the time the sun started setting, Lena's head was spinning with numbers and plans and possibilities. Go home, Victor said finally, looking up from his tablet where he'd been taking notes. Get some rest. We start the real work Monday. What about you? I have meetings tomorrow in the city, investor calls, some other properties I'm managing. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. This is your project, Lena. I'm here for support and funding, but the vision is yours. Don't wait for me to tell you what to do. That's terrifying. That's freedom. He tilted her chin up, kissed her properly. You've got this. I wouldn't have partnered with you if I didn't believe that. Driving back to her apartment that night, Lena felt the weight of the day settling over her. She'd done it, actually done it, bought a vineyard, faced down skeptical employees, started the process of building something entirely her own. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed my family's legacy and humiliated me in front of everyone I know. I'll never forgive you for this. Adrian. Of course, she should have expected this. Lena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Your family's legacy was already destroyed by your incompetence. I'm just fixing what you broke. Lose this number. She blocked it immediately, then turned her phone face down on the seat. The next 6 weeks were a blur of 16-hour days and constant problem-solving. Lena moved into a temporary rental closer to the vineyard so she could be on site by 6 a.m. every morning. She walked the rows with Miguel, learning the specific character of different sections, understanding which vines were thriving and which needed attention. She worked with the production team to refine their processes, implementing quality controls that had been neglected for years. The rebrand moved forward in pieces. A design firm Victor hired presented label concepts based on Lena's original sketches, refining them until they were perfect, modern and clean but with subtle nods to the vineyard's history. A marketing consultant helped her develop the launch strategy, though Lena pushed back on half their suggestions, trusting her own instincts about what their target market wanted. Victor appeared sporadically, usually for important meetings or financial decisions, but mostly he let Lena run things. They talked on the phone almost every night, him updating her on funding and legal issues, her venting about whatever disaster had happened that day. Sometimes those calls turned into something else, voices dropping lower, conversations moving from business to personal, until Lena was lying in bed with the phone pressed to her ear, listening to Victor describe exactly what he'd do to her when he got back. You're terrible for my productivity, she told him one night, still breathing hard from getting herself off to the sound of his voice. And yet you're more productive than you've ever been, Victor pointed out, sounding smug and satisfied. Maybe you work better sexually frustrated. I'm hanging up now. No, you're not. He was right. She didn't. When he did come to the vineyard, they maintained the professional boundaries they'd agreed on during work hours, though several times Lena caught Miguel smirking like he knew exactly what was happening. After everyone else left for the day, Victor would find her in the cottage or the production facility, or once memorably in the barrel room, and they'd tear at each other with a desperation that suggested all the restraint during the day had to be released somehow. We're terrible at boundaries, Lena gasped one evening, her back pressed against a wall in the half-renovated cottage, while Victor worked his hand between her legs. Boundaries are overrated. He bit down on her neck, and she made a sound that was probably loud enough for the workers in the fields to hear. You want me to stop? Don't you dare. The cottage renovation finished on schedule, and Lena moved in on a Saturday with Jess's help. Her roommate, former roommate now, looked around the space with obvious approval. Okay, I'll admit it, this is gorgeous. Jess ran her hand over the new countertops. And you get to wake up looking at grapevines every day. That's disgustingly romantic. It's practical. I need to be on site. Sure, practical. That's why you've got that fancy espresso machine and the bedroom that's definitely big enough for 2 people. Jess grinned. Speaking of, where's the mysterious business partner / boyfriend? He's not my boyfriend. What is he then? Lena didn't have a good answer for that. Partner, definitely. Lover, obviously. But boyfriend seemed too simple, too conventional for whatever complicated thing they were building together. He's Victor, she said finally. That's the best description I've got. Deep. Jess flopped onto the new couch. Have you talked to your family at all? No. Lena, I mean it. I'm done. My mother's sent about 30 messages through various people, all with the same theme, that I'm being cruel and unreasonable and destroying the family. Claire apparently had a breakdown and had to take time off work, which somehow is my fault. I'm the villain in their story, and I'm okay with that. Lena unpacked wine glasses, lining them up in the cabinet. They chose their side. I'm choosing mine. That's lonely, though. I have you. I have this place. I have... She trailed off, not sure how to categorize Victor in a way that made sense. A hot, morally ambiguous business partner who you're definitely sleeping with? That. Jess stood, pulled Lena into a hug. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the right thing, and this place is going to be amazing. The launch was scheduled for late September, timed to coincide with harvest season. Lena threw herself into preparations with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy. She personally tasted every wine they'd be releasing, making final blending decisions that would determine whether the new brand succeeded or failed. She trained the new tasting room staff, worked with the marketing team on the launch event, coordinated with distributors and restaurants and wine shops. 3 weeks before launch, the first major disaster hit. Lena was in the production facility when Miguel found her, his face grim. We have a problem. Section 7, East Slope. Possible fungal infection spreading through the vines. Her stomach dropped. Fungal infections could devastate an entire crop if not controlled quickly. How bad? Bad enough. I've isolated the affected rows, but if it spreads... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They spent the next 72 hours fighting the infection, treating affected vines, monitoring for spread, making the gut-wrenching decision to remove and destroy 2 entire rows that were too compromised to save. Lena barely slept, lived in the fields, and snapped at everyone, including Victor, when he called to check in. I don't have time for this conversation, she told him on the 3rd night, standing in the field at midnight with a flashlight and exhaustion making her eyes burn. Lena, I mean it. We're 3 weeks from launch, and we might lose 10% of our harvest. I need to focus on that. Not on whatever update you're calling about. There was silence on the other end. Then quietly, I'm not calling with an update. I'm calling because I haven't heard from you in 3 days and I wanted to make sure you're okay. The anger drained out of her, leaving just bone-deep fatigue. I'm not okay. I'm terrified. What if this ruins everything? What if we can't deliver on our promises to distributors? What if... Stop. Victor's voice was firm. You're catastrophizing. Take a breath. Tell me what's actually happening, not the worst-case scenario your brain is inventing. She told him. About the infection, the treatments, the rows they'd lost. About Miguel's concern that they'd pushed the vines too hard trying to maximize the harvest. About her fear that she'd made decisions that damaged the very thing she was trying to save. You made the best choices you could with the information you had, Victor said when she finished. That's all anyone can do. And from what you're describing, you caught it early and responded aggressively. The harvest will be smaller than projected, but there will still be a harvest. We adjust projections, modify production numbers, and move forward. Just like that? Just like that. Welcome to agriculture, Lena. Sometimes nature wins. You can't control everything. I hate not being in control. I know, but you're good at adapting, so adapt. He paused. I'm coming up tomorrow. Don't argue. You need sleep. And someone needs to make sure you actually rest instead of working yourself into the ground. He showed up the next morning with food from Lena's favorite Thai place and a determination to enforce mandatory rest periods. They ate on the cottage porch, watching the sunrise over the vines, and Lena felt some of the tension finally ease from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not telling me I'm overreacting, for not saying it's not a big deal, for just getting it." Victor pulled her against his side. "Of course I get it. I've lived through disasters with every property I've acquired. Last year, one of my vineyards in Argentina got hit with hail 3 days before harvest. Lost almost everything. It was devastating." He kissed the top of her head. "But we survived, adjusted, moved forward. You will too." The fungal infection was contained. The harvest happened, smaller than hoped, but still respectable. The wines Lena had been aging came out of barrels and went into bottles with the new labels. And seeing them lined up in the production facility made everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. The launch event was scheduled for a Friday evening, an intimate gathering of industry professionals, critics, potential distributors, and select members of the press. Lena had pushed for keeping it small, manageable, something she could control. Victor had agreed, though he'd insisted on hiring an event coordinator to handle logistics. The night before the launch, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every detail, every potential failure point, every way things could go wrong. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went to the production facility, needing to see the bottles one more time, to reassure herself they were real. She found Victor already there, standing in front of the display they'd set up, wearing jeans and a t-shirt with his hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much coffee? Or anxiety? Hard to tell the difference anymore." He turned to look at her. "You ready for tomorrow?" "No, absolutely not. I'm terrified I'm going to forget how to speak or accidentally insult a major critic or trip and destroy our entire inventory." So, a normal level of pre-launch anxiety. Is that what this is? Normal? Lena moved to stand beside him, studying the bottles that represented months of work. What if nobody likes it? What if the wine isn't as good as I think it is? Then we adjust and try again. But Lena? Victor took her hand, threaded their fingers together. "The wine is exceptional. I've tasted it. Margaret's tasted it. Everyone who's tried it has said the same thing. You did that. You took vines that were being mismanaged and turned them into something extraordinary." "We did that." "No, I wrote checks and made phone calls. You made wine." He pulled her closer. "Tomorrow, when those people taste what you've created, they're going to understand why I bet $8 million on you. They're going to see what I saw that night at the gala. Someone brilliant who just needed the chance to prove it." Lena kissed him, soft and grateful, trying to pour everything she couldn't articulate into the gesture. They made love right there in the production facility, surrounded by bottles and barrels and the smell of oak and fermentation, and it felt like a consecration of everything they'd built. The next morning arrived too quickly. Lena dressed carefully in a simple black dress that was elegant without trying too hard, applied makeup with shaking hands, and tried to eat breakfast despite her stomach being in knots. The event started at 6 p.m. By 5:30, Lena was pacing the tasting room, checking and rechecking the wine stations, the food pairings, the lighting, the music. Victor had to physically stop her from reorganizing the bottles for the third time. "Stop. It's perfect. You're perfect. Breathe." He held her shoulders, made her look at him. "You've got this." Guests started arriving at 6 on the dot. Lena recognized faces from industry publications, from restaurants she'd consulted with, from the gala where this had all started. Margaret was there with David, both looking professional and supportive. Gerald Hartwick showed up fashionably late, his presence alone lending credibility to the event. And then, at 6:45, Claire walked in. Lena saw her across the room and felt everything inside her freeze. Her sister wore a red dress, of course she did, always red, and looked nervous and determined in equal measure. Adrian wasn't with her, at least. Small mercies. Before Lena could decide what to do, Victor materialized at her side. "Want me to have her removed?" "No, it's a public event. She has as much right to be here as anyone." Lena squared her shoulders. "I'm fine." "You're not. But I respect the lie. Victor's hand pressed briefly against the small of her back, grounding. I'll be nearby if you need me. Lena made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions, trying to focus on the people who actually mattered instead of her sister's presence burning like a brand in her peripheral vision. She did a formal welcome speech at 7 p.m., talking about the vineyard's history and their vision for its future, and managed to get through it without her voice shaking. The wines were a hit. She watched people taste, saw their expressions shift from polite interest to genuine appreciation, heard fragments of conversation, exceptional balance, notes of black cherry and tobacco. This is outstanding, that made her want to cry with relief. Hartwick found her near the Cabernet station. Miss Cross, I have to admit I was skeptical when I heard about this venture. Thought it might be more about revenge than winemaking. And now? Now I think you're a serious talent who also happens to have excellent taste in revenge. He raised his glass in salute. This is exceptional work. I'll be placing a significant order for my spring collection. After he walked away, Lena allowed herself one moment of pure triumph. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all the people who doubted her, they'd actually done it. Lena. She turned to find Claire standing there, wine glass clutched in both hands, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. I can't believe you came here, Lena said quietly. I had to. I've been trying to reach you for months. Mom gave me the invitation, said maybe if I saw what you'd built. Claire's voice cracked. I'm sorry. For everything. For Adrian. For how I handled it. For not being the sister you deserved. I was jealous and stupid and I hurt you in the worst possible way. Yes, you did. Is there any chance you can forgive me? Eventually? I'm not asking for now, I know it's too soon, but maybe someday we could… No. Lena kept her voice level, aware of people nearby who might be listening. I'm glad you're sorry, truly. But what you did, what both of you did, that broke something that can't be fixed. We're done, Claire. We'll probably see each other at family events eventually, and we'll be civil, but we're not sisters anymore. Not in any way that matters. Claire's face crumpled. Lena, please. You need to leave. Victor appeared like a shadow, his expression cold. This is a professional event, and you're disrupting it. I'm talking to my sister. Your sister asked you to leave. So leave, or I'll have security escort you out. His hand settled on Lena's waist, proprietary and protective. Claire looked between them, something like hatred flashing across her face before she controlled it. You really traded Adrian for him? For someone everyone knows is a criminal? Lena felt Victor tense beside her, but kept her own expression neutral. Get out, Claire. After she left, Lena excused herself to the bathroom and let herself shake for exactly 2 minutes. Then she fixed her lipstick, straightened her dress, and went back to the event like nothing had happened. The party wound down around 10 p.m. After the last guests left, Lena collapsed onto one of the tasting room couches, exhausted and exhilarated and emotionally wrung out. Victor sat beside her, handed her a glass of their Cabernet. To success. To survival. She clinked her glass against his, took a long drink. What did Claire mean, calling you a criminal? Victor's expression shuddered. Nothing important. Victor. Drop it, Lena. Tonight's your night. Don't let her poison it. The wine orders started rolling in within days of the launch. Hartwick's purchase alone was significant enough to validate everything they'd built, but he wasn't the only one. Restaurants Lena had consulted for placed orders. Wine shops she'd never even contacted reached out asking about distribution. The industry publications that had covered the event ran glowing reviews calling the rebrand audacious and a masterclass in transforming legacy into innovation. Success should have felt good. Instead, Lena found herself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Victor was gone more often now, traveling for his other properties, always with vague explanations about meetings and investor calls. When he was at the vineyard, he seemed distracted, taking phone calls in Italian that he'd walk away to answer. Once, Lena caught the end of a conversation where he sounded angry, almost desperate, though he smiled and kissed her when he came back inside like nothing was wrong. Everything okay? She'd asked. Fine, just dealing with some bureaucratic nonsense overseas. He changed the subject smoothly, asking about harvest projections, and Lena had let it drop because it was easier than pushing. But Claire's words kept echoing. Everyone know is a criminal. 2 months after the launch, Margaret requested an urgent meeting. Lena drove to the city, assuming it was about contracts or distribution agreements. Instead, she found Margaret and David waiting with expressions that made her stomach drop. "What's wrong?" Margaret gestured to a chair. "Sit down. We need to talk about Victor. If this is about our relationship, that's personal and not really—" "It's not about your relationship. It's about his business practices." David pulled up something on his tablet. "We've been going through the acquisition records for the vineyard, doing routine audits, and we found some irregularities in how certain funds were moved." Lena's mouth went dry. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that suggest money laundering, shell companies, offshore accounts, transactions that don't make sense unless they're designed to obscure the source of funds." Margaret's expression was grim. "Lena, we think Victor's been using vineyard acquisitions to clean money from illegal sources. Art theft, possibly. Maybe other things." "That's ridiculous. He's a legitimate businessman. He's acquired dozens of properties." "Exactly. And we started looking into those properties, too. The pattern is consistent. He buys struggling businesses, injects capital from sources that can't be easily traced, turns them around and sells them for clean money." David turned the tablet toward her, showing financial flows that looked damning even to Lena's untrained eye. "We're not the only ones who've noticed. Federal investigators contacted my office last week asking questions about the Cole estate acquisition." The room tilted slightly. Lena gripped the arms of her chair, forcing herself to breathe. "Does Victor know?" "We haven't told him yet. We wanted to talk to you first." Margaret leaned forward. "Lena, you need to understand the position you're in. If federal charges are filed, they could go after everyone involved in the acquisition. That includes you, your partnership agreement, your ownership stake. Everything could be evidence in a criminal case." I didn't know about any of this." "That may not matter. Ignorance isn't always a defense, especially if prosecutors think you should have known." David closed his tablet. "You need to make a decision. You can distance yourself now, dissolve the partnership, sell back your stake, cooperate with investigators. Or you can stick with Victor and potentially go down with him." Lena stood abruptly, needing to move, to think, to process information that was coming too fast. "I need to talk to him." "That's not advisable," Margaret said. "If he is involved in illegal activities, confronting him could be dangerous." "I don't care. I need to hear this from him." Lena grabbed her bag. "Don't do anything until I've talked to Victor. Please." She drove back to the vineyard too fast, her mind racing through every conversation, every decision, every moment with Victor that might have been a clue she'd missed. Had she been willfully blind? Or had he been that good at hiding the truth? Victor's car was parked at the cottage when she arrived. She found him on the porch, working on his laptop, looking infuriatingly normal and handsome, and like someone who hadn't just potentially destroyed her entire life. "Hey," he said, looking up with a smile that faded when he saw her expression. "What happened?" "Inside. Now." He followed her into the cottage, closed the door behind them. "Lena, what's going on?" "Are you laundering money through the vineyard?" Victor went very still. For a moment, Lena thought he might deny it, might laugh and tell her she was being paranoid. Instead, he said quietly, "Who told you?" "So it's true." The confirmation felt like a physical blow. Margaret and David found irregularities. They said federal investigators are asking questions. "Victor, what the hell have you gotten me into? I never meant for you to be involved in this part of things. That's why I kept the financial structure separate. Why I made sure your name wasn't on anything questionable. My name is on a partnership agreement. I own 20% of a property you bought with illegal money. How is that not involved?" Lena's voice was rising, edging toward hysteria. "You used me. You used my dream of owning this vineyard to clean your dirty money." "That's not what this was." Victor reached for her, but she jerked away. "Lena, listen to me. Yes, some of my business dealings are complicated. Yes, I've moved money in ways that aren't entirely legal. But the vineyard, that was real. The partnership was real. Everything we built here was legitimate. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've been lying to me from the beginning?" "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." He ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident. "The art business I'm in, it exists in gray areas. Sometimes pieces come from sources that aren't quite legitimate. Sometimes buyers want discretion that requires creative financial solutions. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never gotten caught because I'm careful. Until now. Until now, he admitted. Something went wrong with a deal in Europe. Someone talked who shouldn't have. Now investigators are connecting dots, and yes, some of those dots lead back to my acquisitions. Lena sank onto the couch, feeling like the world was crumbling around her for the second time in 6 months. Margaret said I need to dissolve the partnership, distance myself before charges are filed. She's probably right. That's it? You're just going to agree? Victor sat across from her, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. I'm not going to let you go down because of my mistakes. If walking away protects you, then that's what you should do. Sell me your stake, let me take the fall alone, rebuild your reputation with a different property. And what happens to you? I'll deal with it. Hire lawyers, fight the charges, probably lose and spend some time in federal prison. He said it matter-of-factly, like he'd already accepted the inevitability. It was always a possibility in this line of work. I just hoped I'd have more time before it caught up with me. You're talking about prison like it's a minor inconvenience. What else can I do? Run? I'm not running. I built something here with you, and I'm not going to let that be tainted by association with me. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The vineyard is yours, Lena. It always was. I was just the vehicle that got you here. Now I'm the liability you need to cut loose. She should have been relieved. He was giving her an out, a way to salvage her dream without going down with his sinking ship. Instead, she felt fury rising. Don't do that. Don't make yourself into some noble sacrifice. You knew what you were doing. You knew the risks, and you let me get involved anyway without telling me the truth. Lena stood, pacing. I deserve to know. I deserve to make an informed choice about whether to partner with someone involved in illegal activities. You're right. You did deserve that. Victor's voice was quiet. I told myself I was protecting you by keeping you separate from that part of my life. But really, I was protecting myself. Because if you'd known the truth from the beginning, you never would have agreed to work with me, and I wanted you too much to risk that. Wanted me for what? For my wine expertise? For legitimacy? For sex? For all of it. He stood, moved toward her slowly like approaching a spooked animal. I wanted your brilliance and your passion and your ability to see potential where others saw failure. I wanted to watch you build something extraordinary. And yes, I wanted you in my bed. Wanted to know what it felt like to be with someone who challenged me and matched me and made me want to be better than I am. That's not good enough. I know. Victor stopped a few feet away. Nothing I say is going to be good enough. I lied by omission. I put you at risk. I broke your trust. You have every right to walk away and never speak to me again. Lena wanted to pack her things, dissolve the partnership, start over somewhere else with her reputation intact. It would be the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice that protected her future. But she'd spent her whole life making smart, safe choices that left her small and unfulfilled. The only time she'd taken a real risk, kissing a stranger at a gala, partnering with a dangerous man, building something audacious from ruins, she'd finally felt alive. I need time, she said. Time to think, time to talk to lawyers, time to figure out what the hell I'm going to do. Take all the time you need. Victor moved toward the door. I'll stay away from the vineyard. Makes it easier for you to distance yourself publicly if I'm not around. After he left, Lena sat in the cottage, surrounded by everything they'd built together, and tried to figure out who she was when she wasn't reacting to someone else's choices. Not Adrian's betrayal. Not Victor's lies. Just Lena, alone with her dreams and her fears, and a decision that would define the rest of her life. The next 2 weeks were hell. News broke about the federal investigation, not just into Victor, but into a network of art theft and money laundering spanning multiple countries. Victor's name was everywhere, along with speculation about his properties and business dealings. The vineyard got mentioned in several articles, with journalists digging into the coal estate acquisition and Lena's involvement. She stopped reading the coverage after the third article that called her either a naive victim or a willing accomplice. Public opinion seemed split on whether she was complicit or just stupid, and Lena wasn't sure which accusation stung more. Margaret filed preliminary paperwork to dissolve the partnership, protecting Lena legally while they waited to see what charges would actually be filed, Orders for wine slowed as distributors got nervous about association with the scandal. 2 restaurants canceled their contracts entirely. Miguel found Lena in the production facility one afternoon, staring at inventory she might not be able to sell. "You look like hell," he observed. "Thanks. That's helpful." "You giving up?" Lena looked at him sharply. "What?" "On the vineyard. On what we built here. You giving up because your partner turned out to be a criminal?" Miguel pulled up a chair, sat down with the ease of someone who'd earned the right to speak his mind. "Because I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've seen owners face all kinds of disasters. Disease, drought, market crashes, scandals. The ones who survive aren't the ones who never face problems. They're the ones who decide the problems don't get to win. This isn't a problem, Miguel. This is potential federal charges. So, you didn't do anything illegal. You made wine. Good wine. Wine that people want to buy. That doesn't change because your business partner made bad choices." He stood, headed toward the door. "You decide what happens next, Miss Lena. You can let this destroy what you built, or you can fight for it. But you better decide soon, because the vines don't care about your legal problems. Harvest is coming, and someone needs to be here to bring it in." After he left, Lena sat with his words for a long time. Then she called Margaret. "I'm not dissolving the partnership," she said when the lawyer answered. "Lena, we discussed this. It's the safest. I don't care about safe. I care about what's right." Lena stood, looking out at the vines through the production facility windows. "Victor made mistakes, yes, but this vineyard, the rebrand, the wine, the success we've had, that was real. That was mine. I'm not giving that up because things got complicated. You could face charges as an accessory. Then I'll fight them. But I'm not running away from what I built." Lena's voice was steady, certain. "I need you to help me, Margaret. Help me structure things so I'm protected legally but still honoring the partnership. Victor invested in my vision, and until he's actually convicted of something, he deserves to benefit from that investment." There was silence on the other end. Then Margaret said, "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Can't I be both?" "Apparently." A pause. "Okay, I'll work on restructuring the agreements. But Lena, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that Victor goes to prison. And when that happens, you'll be running this place entirely on your own." "I know." The charges were filed 3 weeks later. Victor was arrested on a Tuesday morning, and Lena watched the news coverage with a numbness that felt protective. Federal prosecutors outlined a case involving stolen artwork, forged provenance documents, and an international network of dealers and collectors. The evidence looked damning. Victor's lawyer got him released on bail, but the trial date was set for 6 months out. Lena tried to visit him at his apartment in the city, but he refused to see her. His text was brief. "Don't tie yourself to me. Save the vineyard. That's what matters." She wanted to scream at him, to force him to let her stand beside him, to make him understand that she'd already made her choice and he didn't get to take it away from her. Instead, she threw herself into work with a ferocity that worried even Miguel. The harvest that year was exceptional. Lena personally oversaw every stage, making decisions about when to pick, which grapes went into which wines, how long to age and in what barrels. She worked 16-hour days, fell into bed exhausted, and woke up to do it again. Slowly, the scandal faded from headlines. New controversies emerged to capture public attention. The vineyard's association with Victor's case became old news, and orders started picking back up. Not to the levels they'd been before, but enough to keep things running. The trial, when it finally happened, was swift and brutal. Prosecutors presented mountains of evidence, financial records, testimony from dealers who'd flipped, documentation of stolen pieces moving through Victor's network. His lawyers fought hard, arguing that Victor had been deceived by others, that he'd believed the provenance documents were legitimate, that he was a victim of fraud rather than a perpetrator. Nobody believed them. Lena attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back of the courtroom despite Margaret's advice to stay away. She watched Victor maintain his composure, saw him in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, looking every inch the sophisticated businessman, even as prosecutors painted him as a criminal. Their eyes met once across the courtroom. Victor's expression was complicated. Regret and resignation, and something that might have been love or might have been guilt or might have been both. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned with a guilty verdict on multiple counts, Lena felt the air leave the room. Victor didn't react visibly, just nodded slightly like he'd expected exactly this outcome. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge gave Victor 7 years in federal prison, noting that while the crimes were serious, Victor had no prior criminal record and had cooperated with recovering some of the stolen pieces. With good behavior, he'd serve maybe 5 years. Lena sat in the cottage that night with a bottle of their Cabernet, the one that had won awards, the one that proved she knew what she was doing, and tried to imagine 5 years without Victor. 5 years of running the vineyard alone. 5 years of sleeping in a bed that still smelled like him, walking rows of vines they'd planned together, making decisions without his input or support or infuriating confidence. She should have dissolved the partnership when she had the chance, should have protected herself, moved on, started fresh somewhere else. Instead, she poured herself another glass of wine and started drafting a letter. The federal prison where Victor was being held was 3 hours away. Lena made the drive once a month, sitting in a sterile visiting room, surrounded by other people who'd made the choice to stick with someone the world said they should abandon. The first visit was awkward. They sat across from each other at a small table, guards watching, and neither seemed to know what to say. "You shouldn't be here," Victor said finally. "Probably not." Lena folded her hands on the table. "But I am, anyway." "The vineyard is doing well. We exceeded projections for the year. The Pinot Noir won a gold medal at the state competition. Miguel says the new vines we planted are thriving." She kept her voice matter-of-fact, businesslike. "I'm expanding the tasting room, adding a small restaurant component. Not a full kitchen, just wine pairings with locally sourced cheeses and charcuterie. I think it'll drive membership numbers." Victor listened, his expression unreadable. "You don't need my approval for any of that." "I know. I'm not asking for approval. I'm telling you what's happening with the business we built together." Lena met his eyes. "You're still my partner, Victor. Prison doesn't change that. I'm a convicted felon. You're also the person who saw potential in me when everyone else saw Adrian Cole's jilted ex-girlfriend. You're the person who bet $8 million on my vision. You're the person who taught me that sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better." She paused. "You made mistakes. You paid for them, but that doesn't erase everything else. You should move on. Find someone who isn't going to be locked up for the next 5 years." "I'm not interested in moving on. I'm interested in building the best vineyard in California and making sure that when you get out, there's still something worth coming back to." They talked for the remaining 30 minutes of visiting time, about harvest projections, about staffing decisions, about Lena's plan to start a second label targeting younger wine drinkers. It felt normal and surreal at the same time, discussing business strategies in a prison visiting room. When time was up, Victor said quietly, "Thank you for not giving up on me. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the letters I'm going to send. I'm terrible at writing letters. Very long and rambling and probably too emotional. I'll read every word." The letters became a routine. Lena wrote every week, filling pages with updates about the vineyard, stories about Miguel's dry observations, and the weird customers in the tasting room, her thoughts about wine and business, and occasionally about how much she missed him. She didn't hold back, wrote about the hard days when she felt overwhelmed, the good days when everything clicked, her ongoing anger at what he'd done mixed with understanding about why he'd done it. Victor wrote back, shorter letters but honest ones. He talked about prison life without dramatizing it, about the books he was reading, about having time to think about choices and consequences. He never asked her to wait for him, never made promises about the future, just wrote like someone trying to maintain connection across an impossible distance. The vineyard thrived. Lena discovered she was better at running things alone than she'd expected, decisive where she'd been tentative before, confident in her vision without needing external validation. The second label launched to modest success. The tasting room restaurant became popular with locals, not just tourists. Hartwick became an unlikely ally, sending clients her way and vouching for the vineyard's reputation even during the worst of the scandal. When Lena asked why he'd stuck by her, he just shrugged. "I believe in talent. You have it. The rest is noise." 2 years into Victor's sentence, Adrian showed up at the vineyard. Lena was in the tasting room when Miguel found her, his expression somewhere between amused and concerned. "You have a visitor." Your ex. Tell him to leave. I tried. He says he needs to talk to you. Says it's important. Lena sighed, set down the inventory list she'd been reviewing. Fine. 5 minutes. Then I want him gone. Adrian looked different. Older, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with failure. His family's other assets had been sold off to cover debts. He was working for someone else's vineyard now, taking orders instead of giving them. What do you want? Lena asked, not bothering with pleasantries. To apologize. For real this time, not the half-assed attempt I made before. Adrian looked around the tasting room, at the success evident in every detail. You did it. What I couldn't do with the family legacy, you did in 3 years. Yes, I did. I was wrong. About you. About what you were capable of. About everything. He met her eyes. Claire and I aren't together anymore, if you care. Turned out a relationship built on betrayal doesn't last. Who knew? I don't care. I figured, but I wanted you to know anyway. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you won. Glad you took something broken and made it beautiful. You deserved that chance, and I'm sorry I wasn't smart enough to give it to you myself. After he left, Lena felt a strange sense of closure. Not forgiveness exactly. What Adrian and Claire had done would always be a betrayal that shaped her, but understanding, maybe. Recognition that they were all just people making choices, some better than others, all living with the consequences. She wrote Victor about the visit that night, about Adrian's apology and her own surprising lack of anger. His response came 2 weeks later. That's growth, being able to let go of fury without needing to forgive. Proud of you. 3 years in, the vineyard won a major national award for their reserve Cabernet. Lena accepted the trophy at a ceremony in front of industry professionals who'd once written her off as a scandal. She gave a speech about resilience, about building something meaningful from ruins, about how the best wine often comes from vines that have struggled. She didn't mention Victor by name, but she thought about him the entire time. Year 4 brought another harvest, another season of making decisions and solving problems, and proving that success wasn't a fluke. Lena hired more staff, expanded production, started fielding serious acquisition offers from larger companies who wanted to buy the vineyard. She turned them all down. Year 5 arrived faster than Lena expected. Victor's release date was set for October, contingent on good behavior that his lawyer assured her hadn't been a problem. Lena found herself anxious in a way she hadn't been since the trial, uncertain what it would mean to have him back, whether they'd still fit together after so much time apart. She was in the cottage the evening before his release when her phone rang. Victor, calling from the prison for the last time. Hey, she said, hating how nervous she sounded. Hey yourself. His voice was warm, familiar despite the years. Tomorrow's the day? Tomorrow you're free. Free-ish. Parole, probation, all the usual restrictions. A pause. Lena, you know you don't owe me anything, right? These past 5 years, the letters, the visits, running the vineyard, you've gone above and beyond any reasonable partnership agreement. If you want me to stay away, just say so. Do you want to stay away? No, I want to come home and see what you've built, and maybe convince you to give me another chance at being part of your life. Victor's voice dropped lower. But only if that's what you want too. Lena looked around the cottage, at the home she'd made, at the view of vines that were hers in a way they'd never been anyone else's. She thought about 5 years of letters and monthly visits and building something extraordinary out of betrayal and scandal and impossible choices. Come home, she said. We'll figure out the rest as we go. The next day, Lena drove to the prison to pick him up. Victor emerged looking thinner, older, with gray threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But his smile when he saw her was the same, sharp and genuine and full of dangerous possibility. You look good, he said, climbing into the passenger seat. You look like you've been in federal prison for 5 years. That's because I have been. Victor turned to look at the facility behind them as Lena pulled away. Let's never do that again. Deal. They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Victor said, Tell me about the vineyard. I want to hear everything. So Lena told him. About the expansion, the awards, the acquisition offers she'd refused, about Miguel's ongoing dry commentary and the weird customers and the small restaurant that had become an unexpected success, about the struggles and the victories and the 100 decisions she'd made without him. "You didn't need me," Victor said when she finished. "No, I didn't." Lena glanced at him. "Turns out I'm perfectly capable of running a vineyard on my own. Who knew?" "I did. That's why I partnered with you in the first place." When they reached the vineyard, Lena pulled through the gates and watched Victor's expression as he took in the changes. New signage, expanded parking, the tasting room with its addition visible from the drive. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "Better than I imagined." "It's ours." Lena parked near the cottage. "If you want it to be. The partnership is still active. Your stake is still yours. But I need to know what you want, Victor. Are you here to be my business partner or something else?" He turned to face her fully. "What do you want?" "I want someone who's honest with me. Someone who sees me as an equal, not someone to protect or manipulate or keep in the dark for their own good. I want a partner in every sense, business and personal and everything in between." Lena held his gaze. "Can you be that person?" "I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know if I'm capable of being that open, that vulnerable. Prison teaches you to guard yourself, keep everything locked down." Victor reached out, traced his fingers along her jaw like he had that first night at the gala. "But I want to try. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure out how to be a better version of myself." "I can do patient. I ran a vineyard while you were in prison and didn't burn it down. That requires patience." He laughed, and it sounded rusty from disuse. Then he kissed her, soft and tentative like they were starting over from scratch. Maybe they were. They got out of the car and walked through the vineyard together, Victor asking questions about production methods and barrel aging while Lena explained her decisions. It felt right in a way that should have scared her, but didn't. They'd been through worse than awkward reunions and uncertain futures. Miguel found them near the reserve vines, his expression carefully neutral. "Boss, you're back." "Seems that way." Victor extended his hand. "Thank you for taking care of things while I was gone." "I didn't take care of anything. Miss Lena did that. I just followed her orders." Miguel shook hands anyway. "You planning to stick around?" "That depends on whether your boss will let me." Miguel looked at Lena, something like approval in his eyes. She's smarter than she used to be. Probably won't make the same mistakes twice. "Good thing I'm planning to make entirely new mistakes," Victor said. "That's what I'm afraid of." But Miguel was almost smiling as he walked away. That night, Lena and Victor sat on the cottage porch with glasses of their reserve Cabernet, watching the sun set over the vines they'd fought for and nearly lost and somehow managed to save. "I never apologized," Victor said suddenly, "for lying to you, for putting you at risk, for being so focused on what I wanted that I didn't give you the choice to protect yourself." "You're right, you didn't. I'm sorry, truly. I'd take it back if I could, but I can't, so all I can offer is the promise to do better going forward." Lena sipped her wine, considering. "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, or because enough time has passed, or because I'm a particularly forgiving person, but because holding on to anger about choices you made 5 years ago doesn't serve me anymore. We're different people now. Might as well start fresh." "Just like that?" "Not just like that. I'm still angry about parts of it, still working through trust issues and occasionally wanting to throw things at you when I think about everything that happened. But I'm choosing to move forward anyway." She turned to look at him. "That's what we do, right? We take broken situations and build something better from them. That's literally our whole business model." Victor pulled her closer, and she let herself lean against him, breathing in the familiar scent mixed with something institutional and strange that would probably fade with time. "What do you want the next 5 years to look like?" he asked. Lena thought about it, about the vineyard expanding, about new labels and awards and recognition, about building not just a business but a life that felt complete instead of like she was constantly waiting for the next disaster. "I want to make wine that people remember years after drinking it. I want to build a reputation that isn't about scandal or comeback stories, but just about excellence. I want to wake up in this cottage and walk through those vines and feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She paused. "And I want you here with me, if that's what you want too." "It is." Victor kissed the top of her head. I spent 5 years in a cell thinking about what matters. This matters. You matter. I'm not walking away from that again. The future unfolded slowly, deliberately. Victor threw himself into the business side of operations, handling finances and distribution with a legitimacy born from having paid the price for his past mistakes. He was careful now, transparent in ways he'd never been before, learning to trust Lena with the truth even when it was uncomfortable. They fought sometimes, about decisions, about trust, about Victor's tendency to make plans without consulting her first. But they also learned to fight fair, to listen even when angry, to remember that they were building something together that mattered more than being right. The vineyard continued to grow. Within 3 years of Victor's return, they'd expanded to 50 acres, acquired an adjacent property, and established the coal estate, renamed simply Cross and DeLuca, as one of the premier vineyards in California. Awards accumulated. Their wine club hit 5,000 members. Restaurants competed for their allocation. But more than the success, more than the recognition, Lena felt something she'd never had before: certainty. Not that everything would always go perfectly, or that there wouldn't be more disasters and struggles ahead, but certainty that she was capable of handling whatever came, that she'd built something real on her own terms, with a partner who matched her strength instead of trying to diminish it. 7 years after that night at the gala, Lena stood in the middle of the vineyard during harvest season, watching workers bring in grapes that would become next year's vintage. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Victor was somewhere in the production facility, probably arguing with Miguel about fermentation temperatures. The tasting room would open tomorrow for a special event celebrating their latest award. Everything she'd fought for, everything she'd risked, everything she'd built from the wreckage of betrayal and scandal, it was real. It was hers. It was theirs. Jess found her there, visiting for the weekend with her new girlfriend. "You okay? You look weirdly contemplative." "Just thinking," Lena smiled, "about how I became a scandal to build an empire." "That's very dramatic." "It's also true." Lena linked arms with her friend, started walking back toward the cottage. "You know what the strangest part is? I'm grateful. For Adrian's betrayal, for the gala disaster, for everything falling apart. Because if it hadn't, I'd still be making myself small to fit someone else's vision of who I should be. Personal growth through catastrophe, very on brand for you." They laughed, and Lena thought about the woman she'd been that night at the Palazzo Fontaine, desperate and humiliated and so scared of being alone. That woman had kissed a dangerous stranger and set off a chain of events that destroyed her old life completely. But from those ruins, she'd built something extraordinary, not perfect, nothing worthwhile ever was, but real in hers and worth every risk she'd taken to get here. Victor emerged from the production facility, spotted her, and started walking over. His smile was the same one that had convinced her to take a chance 7 years ago, sharp and knowing and full of possibility. "Ready for dinner?" he called. "Miguel's wife made tamales and she's threatening to force feed us if we don't come eat." "Threatening or promising?" Lena called back. "With her cooking, is there a difference?" She took his hand when he reached her, let him pull her close. Behind them, the vineyard stretched toward the hills, rows of vines heavy with grapes that would become something beautiful, given time and care and the right conditions. Just like everything else worth building, Lena thought. Just like love, just like legacy, just like a life constructed from the pieces of a shattered past. The best wine came from vines that struggled, that fought through difficult conditions and emerged stronger. The best people were probably the same, shaped by their battles, defined by their resilience, made extraordinary by refusing to break. Lena had been broken once, in front of 200 witnesses, but she'd put herself back together differently, better, into someone who didn't wait for permission or approval or someone else's validation. And that version of herself, the one who took risks and built empires and turned betrayal into triumph, was someone she was proud to be.